The special study session of the Aurora City Council for Tuesday, September 17th, 2024 is called to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Kaufman?
Here.
Councilmember Bergen?
Here.
Councilmember Coombs? Councilmember Gardner? Councilmember Hancock? Councilmember Jurenski? Councilmember Lawson?
Here.
Councilmember Medina? Councilmember Mario? Councilmember Sundberg?
I'm here.
Mayor Pro Tem Zabonik?
Right. Well, the meeting is called to order, and I want to welcome the Citizens Advisory Budget Committee here. I happen to be a member of the Citizens Advisory Budget Committee back when the earth was cooling a long time ago. And so who is going to kick off the presentation?
I'm going to start it off. So good evening, Mayor Kaufman and
Daniel,
members of
thank
City
you.
Council. I'm Danielle Lamon, Chair of the 2024 Aurora Citizens Advisory Budget Committee. We appreciate the opportunity to contribute to the city's budget process and present our findings and recommendations tonight. So next slide. I may have already jumped like 2 slides here. So
Can everybody see the slides?
Yes. And then if you want to move on, Greg.
Sure.
Perfect, thank you. So our report overview is going to have our main focus this year was looking at the overall fiscal health and community needs of our city. And so we had 3 subcommittees that were approved to move forward, which and you'll hear from tonight, Economically Strong will be presented by John O. Scott. Community Engagement will be presented by Deborah Johnson. Outsourcing for Well-Managed City presented by Janet Marlowe. And then we did have a public safety subcommittee that was not approved to move forward, so we will not be hearing a report from them tonight. If you'll move on, please. And so this year we met July 23rd and 24th, and the CABC was guided through the same packet that was presented to City Council. And this process ensured that our review was aligned with City Council's insights and hopefully have consistencies with priorities. We do recommend going forward with the approval of our city manager's budget as presented. And if you'll move to the next one, please. Each subcommittee is going to be reporting on the objectives, their findings, and their recommendations for the evening. So we're going to go ahead and move right on to our community engagement. And I believe I saw Deborah Johnson. So if you're ready, Deborah, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Danielle. My name is Deborah Johnson. I was chair of the subcommittee of the community engagement, and the other committee members included Erica Alfonso, Omar Montgomery, and George Peck. The community engagement subcommittee's objective is to support the City Council's connected and engaged strategic outcome by providing data and outreach on 2 key projects: a multi-purpose arts and entertainment center, which the CABC has been advocating for years, and a youth empowerment center. Next slide. Our findings are the city's efforts to develop a multi-purpose arts and entertainment venue show a clear need with significant support from various stakeholders. Also, approximately 70% of Aurora residents leave the city for entertainment, indicating a strong economic case for the venue. Youth Empowerment Center is still in the early planning stages, but has strong community support and includes earmarked funds from the city. Next slide. The subcommittee's recommendations include, number 1, continue support for the Johnson's consulting study on the arts and entertainment venue, and encourage the City Council to keep in mind and review the comprehensive study of 2023, the CABC provided. Number 2, develop a clear vision and project plan for the Youth Empowerment Center, including measurable metrics and firm commitments from community partners. Now, the outsourcing for a well-managed cities with Janet will do the next subcommittee's report.
Great, thank you. So I was chair of the outsourcing for well managed. Other members were Sunny Banka, Marsha Bergens, David Rich, Michael Senick, Julie Marie Shepard Macklin, and Katrina Zarel. Next slide. So our objective was the members of the subcommittee were tasked with looking into the possibility of outsourcing certain departments within the city as it relates to the overall fiscal health. Question: is it more advantageous to contract out certain services or hire more full-time employees, and how will that change the dynamics and services within the city of Aurora? Next slide.
Uh-oh,
Yeah, we lost it.
we lost everything. Interesting. Give me 1 second to hop back in.
It was just me, right, Greg?
It was you. You were doing such a good job that my computer decided to just turn off completely. Okay. Let me get back in. Share once again.
Okay.
Are we back on?
Yes.
Next slide.
Okay.
Thank you. So as you can see, many of our findings were several of the city departments already are outsourced. And you can see some of those on the slide. Some of the things that we found were outsourcing is beneficial during work, peak out workloads, projects requiring specialized expertise, or in cases of labor shortage. We use the city of Centennial as our kind of our benchmark. They outsource about 90% of their services. So the subcommittee sat down with them, with both Mayor Pico and the city manager, Matt Sturgeon, and had a really, really in-depth conversation with them. Next slide. So our recommendations is the subcommittee recommends the city council and city manager explore additional advantageous outsourcing opportunities with the assistance and input of the city departments. A cost analysis that compares labor and benefits cost versus outsourcing costs would be needed. In the subcommittee's preferred model, the contractor absorbs most, if not all, of the current city employees at their current rate, as this provides a workforce pool for the contractor and results in continued employment for the city employees. And one of the things we also recommend is putting in a reduction in services clause that if at any time budget restrictions and or workloads or whatever the project is does not need as much as was contracted, there is a reduction clause that says that we can reduce those demands. And that was our report. Now I would like to turn it over to John O. Scott for Economically Strong.
Thank you, Janet, and thank you, Mayor and Council, for having us today. I want to thank Greg Hayes and the entire budget department for their work at the budget book and their work with the budget for the city. I'd also refer you to appendix or section H 7 through 15, where our report is. Our Economically Strong subcommittee specifically is on pages H 8, 9, and 10. I also want to recognize the others on our subcommittee. Gretchen Dirks did a lot of work on the spreadsheet, which I'll refer to. Shane Doyle, Danielle Lamon, Jim Matson, who's also available if there's any questions, and Bob Roth. The six of us worked together to put this report together. Next slide, please. So our objectives were to determine the extent of the city budget allocated to nonprofits and non-governmental organizations, ensure consistent policies for these expenditures, just to kind of try to find a bottom line. The question was brought up, well, how much does the city spend to nonprofits or NGOs? And that was our task. We wanted to establish a consistent system across city departments for approving, monitoring, and evaluating nonprofit and NGO expenditures and see if that policy was in place. Next slide, please. Here's our findings. 8 departments provided data. We had reached out to 20 and received data back from 8 of the departments, revealing funding for nearly 70 nonprofit and NGOs within those 8 departments that provided us data. The amounts ranging from about $5,000 provided to about $1.5 million provided for those nonprofits and NGOs. We did find some inconsistencies in how departments vet, approve, and audit nonprofits. Also, I want to clarify, there is some that are directly from the budgets of our cities, and some are merely pass-throughs. So if we get funding from arts and or Broncos funding, we are a pass-through. Others are directly from our budget. Some organizations we found lacked current IRS or Colorado Secretary of State status, highlighting potential risks, specifically if we have a CORA request. As I mentioned, several on the committee, specifically Gretchen, Dirks, and Jim, put a lot of work into a spreadsheet. We did not, we wanted to summarize the information that we provided you, but we do have that available. If any of you would like to have that information, we'd be happy to share that spreadsheet. We did not want to provide names or name call or call anybody out. But we do have that information if you so desire or you want to see that. It would be helpful. The city's only policy and nonprofit funding is outdated and limited in scope, and we found that, and we would just like to suggest that there be more uniform policy and procedure in vetting and approving and auditing the money that is spent in our budget in this area. Next slide, please. Recommendations we have, we would recommend implementing a regular accounting system for all city budget lines funding nonprofits and NGOs. I think that'd be very helpful for city council and city staff to be able to have that bottom line number, and it would give resources. We're not necessarily suggesting or recommending cutting the funding. What we are saying is it would be nice to have that knowledge readily on hand and have a regular accounting system that's standard across city departments and city lines there. We also recommend creating a unified policy to govern city funding on nonprofits and non-governmental organizations, and making sure that they're in compliance with the IRS and the Colorado Secretary of State requirements. As I've mentioned, we did find some that we are currently funding that are on the restricted list of those 2 organizations. And so if there were to be a CORA request or something like that, that could put us at risk. And so we want to at least have that. We don't think there's any ill will, but we do think that information should be readily available, especially to city council. We also recommend establishing an annual reapplication or audit process for nonprofits and NGOs receiving city funding, including documentation of how the funds were used, their impact, or really the benefit for the city. And that would once again be helpful in decision making for city staff and city council. Next slide, please.
Perfect.
I'll turn it back over to Danielle. Thank you, Danielle.
Yeah, thanks, Jono. Thank you so much for listening to our reports. And the 2024 CABC report offers a comprehensive look at improving fiscal management and community engagement in Aurora. Our recommendations aim to enhance accountability, support significant community projects, and explore cost-effective service delivery methods. We believe these measures will contribute to a stronger, more vibrant Aurora. We thank you for your time and considerations, and we're happy to address any questions or provide further details if anybody has any. I see Francois has her hand up. Oh, go ahead, Francois.
Okay, thank you. First, I want to say thank you to the CABC for working on these subcommittees. I know you guys put a lot of work into it, and having been on CABC for 4 years, I understand the commitment, and I do appreciate all of you. A few questions. So on the outsourcing, was there anything taken into consideration on certain departments that would actually maybe be negatively affected if it was outsourced versus, continual FTE?
Danielle, you want me to answer that?
Oh, yes, please, Janet. Sorry, I saw you came off mute. Yes, please.
So that's okay. We did look at some that probably would not make any sense to outsource compared to Centennial. One of the biggest ones was obviously the police department. They outsourced their police department for Aurora. That would probably not make any sense whatsoever. That we really didn't dig that deep into which ones would or would not. We kind of wanted that to be the city managers and the city departments, kind of them to look at, are there certain areas that they can outsource? Are there certain workloads that they can outsource?
Okay, great. I have two more questions. One is on the well-managed city, or not the well-managed city, the nonprofit study that was done. And I appreciate all the work that went into that. Sounds like you guys really dug into a lot of information. And if I'm understanding correctly, 8 departments out of 20 responded. So that was a little bit concerning to me. I do think your suggestion of the IRS compliance is really important, well-founded, that we make sure that we are in compliance from that perspective. Did you break out any of the nonprofits between city funds versus, federal funds, like the ARPA dollars? Because those obviously will not exist after the end of this year.
Yes, I'll also refer that to Jim, but yes, we did. And as I alluded to, several are pass-through funds as far as the sale of the Broncos funding or other funding. And those nonprofits are simply a pass-through that the city budget uses. However, some are grant funding. And I believe on the spreadsheet, we do delineate that, but I'll also defer to Jim.
I can jump in as well if Jim isn't prepped or not, but we on the report that we were talking about that we can share with you on our spreadsheet, the response of the 8 departments, and our understanding is only 8 departments actually give money to nonprofits out of the 20. So it's not that, so Greg initially sent to all the departments an email and said, if your department contributes to any kind of nonprofits, NGOs, please respond back so we know. So it wasn't a negligence on the departments. It was our understanding there's only 8 departments that are actually actively participating in nonprofit NGO funding.
Okay, and then the total nonprofits was, I've got the report here, but I don't see it right off firsthand. How many nonprofits approximately?
It was 70 approximately. 70, right? And
go ahead,
Go ahead, Jono.
Okay, the 70, that's just based on the 8 departments, and it's our understanding there's no way for us to know right now of those other 12 departments. We're simply going on what was reported, and there's no other way for us to gather that information, that data, and that was kind of one of our concerns is how do we know?
Right.
And this is simply based on the data we received. Our positive hope is that the other 12 simply are not funding or not part of nonprofit organizations, and that's our understanding and that's our hope, but there's no way for us to confirm that.
Yeah, it sounds, I mean, obviously there's departments in the city that would never be funding a nonprofit, so that makes sense to me. So I just want to thank you for a really good report. And then my last question is, you mentioned there was a public safety committee, subcommittee, do we have someone from the subcommittee that could answer why it did not move forward?
I can answer that. This is Maxim Gimmelstein. I was one of the members. We had a working copy that was in final draft, and right before the vote, there was a complete rewrite that was unexpected by the subcommittee. As such, we voted to not make the submission because the draft that was presented for the final vote was so significantly and completely different.
Okay, I just wanted to, to verify that you did actually have a committee and you did work. So, and certainly it's your prerogative to not move it forward. So I appreciate that answer. So those are all my questions. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilwoman Lawson?
Thank you. And thank you so much for doing the report. I also served on the CABC, so I appreciate all the work that you guys have do on these reports. I have a question on the well-managed city in terms of the nonprofits. When you went through and looked at all of the departments, were there specific, did you go through it by a program? For example, did you see if youth violence prevention, I'm just giving that as an example, as they get NOFO and NOFO dollars. Did you kind of look at it from that program scale as well? Or did you say that and I might have missed it? Because when you're talking about departments, I'm looking at departments, but I'm also looking at the programs within the departments.
I'll follow up with that one. What we did, and that's going to be in the spreadsheet. So again, Greg has a copy if you want a copy to see it.
I do want a copy of that. So.
We 100% just basically did fact finding. We didn't necessarily break anything down other than the data that was given. Some of the departments gave us a lot of data and some kind of skimmed over it. So I'll just leave it at that and you can read the report because we purely just took what came into us and put it in the report. We asked all the departments the same questions, the same format. And so we just, whatever was given, we put in there as a pure fact finding to have, council recommend to move forward with that in a different direction or somebody else to take a deeper dive.
Okay, and then my second question to you, I appreciate that response. My second question is in regarding, and this is something I had talked to the mayor about, in terms of, have you seen like what the NOFO questions are? Because to me, it's the type of information that we put out for the application process that I think is very important for maybe as us policymakers to review, because I think there's some of the criteria that needs to be built into that form. And the requirements need to be revised. And that's just my opinion on that. Were you guys able to look at some of what the criteria are for some of these when you were examining this subject matter?
No one provided us with any of the data or application processes that they use. And we did specifically ask them that. I believe only one department came back and said, we have a process, and they cited part of, gosh, now I'm trying to think where we were on that. If you guys, Jim or Jono, remember, it's specifically within the city regulations, is that what we call it, the guidelines. And so we started going down a deeper dive to see, but that's where Jono said it's very out of date. So
yeah, I really appreciate that because it would have been really good. I know you guys spent a lot of time on this report, but to get some recommendations on how that application process and what kind of questions we should be asking when we're issuing money, and specifically when it has to deal with our general fund or taxpayer dollars. So I do appreciate you. I wish you guys would have gotten the form because it would have been nice to have some suggestions from the committee of what we could do to make the form a little bit different, because some of those questions I think are very, very, that they have some gray areas. So I do appreciate that for that, that you guys at least looked into that. And then just my last question, I'm sorry if I'm taking up a lot of time. My last question on the Youth Empowerment Center. I know that that's kind of an evolving project. Based on just the report that I looked, did you guys have any kind of concerns or things that we should be looking at when we're thinking about the Youth Empowerment Center, except for what you guys have in your report?
I think that this is Deborah Johnson, and I think what we alluded to is that it is in its infancy stages. And I think given that the city has earmarked some dollars for it, that there needs to be some really foundation built for it in terms of a mission, some measurable outcomes that need to be given on that, and really get some firm commitments from the partners, the community partners that have voiced, but they have not given you any written or firm commitments in terms of their participation in that center. So we think that it's well supported. However, it's kind of floundering out there in terms of its foundation.
Okay, thank you so much, Deborah. And thank you everybody for the committee and addressing my questions. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. And Mayor Kaufman?
Well, I want to thank you all for your work on this. I know it's not easy, and Councilmember Lawson is going to be bringing forward a proposal when it comes to the nonprofits that on youth violence prevention, we're going to really kind of move away from a lot of the nonprofits that we use that I think that the metrics are not all that tangible, and she's going to, in her proposal, will have us work more directly with school districts on youth violence prevention programs, which I think will be a lot more effective. We're not just going to, under her proposal, we won't just appropriate an amount. It'd be for very specific ideas that they have. I think one idea that I know that may go forward is to give some money to the school resource officers to recognize children that are at risk that may not have the resources with their family to be able to participate in, let's say, sports activities and be able to do that and cement a closer relationship between the SROs and some of the at-risk students. Councilmember Lawson, do you have anything to add on that?
Nothing else to be added, but again, I think we've tried a lot with the youth violence prevention program specifically, and I think we're going into 3.0. And you know, it's an evolving process. So hopefully with this, we may really be able to get some defined metrics and really help the youth. So I appreciate the mayor's support on this as well. And thank you for you guys for everything that you did on this report as well. So.
Yeah. Okay. If I could, Madam Chair.
Yes.
So let me just say on the outsourcing issue, I think you've got a point there. I think maybe it could be expressed in a little bit more refined way by saying if we are adding a new, well, I think that there are things that are simply more competitively done in the private sector that we've had trouble filling jobs for, you know, like cleaning services and things like that. And I think that there's been some actions done to put those more in a contract, like in the recreation centers. I think that change was made, and I think that looking at, you know, grounds maintenance and things like that. But and I think whenever we get into like a new service or something like that, that is something that's competitively done by the private sector, I think we ought to take a hard look at that. So thanks for bringing that up.
Absolutely. And I just want to follow up, Councilwoman Watson, really quickly. In our written report, we actually go into more recommendations on those questions to ask for grants and different like kind of requirements that we were talking about, kind of those checks and balances for being for having like registered with the state of Colorado, registered and active with the IRS. Those, they're in our written report towards the end.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
page H9 in the budget book. If you're looking, that's where we would kind of lay that out.
Right.
Thank you for that. I do my reading, but thank you for that specific. So I appreciate.
It's a lot of
Yeah.
reading. So perfect. Thanks, Jono. Any other questions from anybody? Okay, so I guess seeing none,
Mayor.
then. Oops.
What? I'm sorry.
This is
Thank you.
Councilmember Murillo.
Oh, Councilmember Murillo, please proceed.
Thank you. Apologies, I'm off camera. Yeah, thank you for the time and energy you put to put this together. Some of my questions were answered, but just I guess
Unknown
a
participant
comment,
is now exiting.
Oh, as we decide, I think it makes sense that, right, this was very preliminary, high level, and that we would need to engage different departments for any follow-up work because, you know, I appreciate the desire and do think that there should be criteria. I wonder, though, if like a wholly uniform, maybe there are some things like, you know, compliance that, you know, should be consistent across all of our organizations and nonprofits. But as far as like criteria to assess and understand, you know, organizations and their contributions and output between different categories of work, right? Just, you know, kind of using that last example, youth violence prevention, like the nature of that work is going to look very different than organizations that do, I don't know, housing. So I just wanted to just like name and uplift that point, that, you know, I do think we should have some metrics and consistency, and also be clear when those need to be a little bit more specialized depending on like the issue or subject matter or program that we're dealing with, that is just informed by that body of work. Like, for example, like if we do, sorry, not to like focus on youth violence prevention, but youth violence prevention, like the way that the state and different counties collect data are all different. There's inconsistencies even in how nonprofits navigate providing services that like have nothing to do with them. So being clear on the limitations that just kind of exist more broadly, that we might be wanting to ask more about. Not that we shouldn't ask for like metrics and all of that, but if we're asking for metrics in a specific way, there might just be some limitations on how that's even just done with the feds or the state as an example. So I just wanted to uplift that, and just thanks for your work. And I hope that if there is follow-up, that there is some attention to those specifics that will be different across different program areas and systems, kind of more broadly.
Great, thank you. Any other final questions? Okay, then thank you so much to Greg and your department. We appreciate everything you guys provide to us, and we hope you guys have a great evening, and we are here if you have further questions after the meeting ends tonight.
Well,
Thanks for your work.
Thank you so much for your leadership, and thanks everybody on CABC for all your hard work. Really appreciate it. Very important.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See 1B, Citizens Advisory Committee on Housing and Community Development. Katie, do you need any time to set up?
Good
Evening,
evening,
everybody.
Mayor. Good evening, council members. Alicia Arculari Montoya. I am the Housing and Community Development Manager here at Housing and Community Development in the Housing and Community Services Department. This is the presentation on the Citizens Advisory Committee. And just a little bit of background on the Citizens Advisory Committee. Their goal is to assist City Council in the development, implementation, and evaluation of the city's community development grant, the Home Improvement Partnership Act, Emergency Solutions Grant. They have been traditionally doing this through review and recommendations in the Community Investment Financing Gap program that we present and bring to council twice a year. They support us in the development and approval of community development goals and objectives. And they help us create the space that we need to get community feedback through public comment and the meetings that we hold every month. They also help us maintain consistency in achieving the Aurora City Council goals and review applicable consolidated annual and other plans, such as the housing strategy, the 5-year consolidated plan, and the annual plan. If we can move to the next slide, please. I would like to introduce also Jamie Carolina. He was actually appointed as the chair of the committee last week. So timing on the slides, but he is actually now the chair of the committee. And he will provide an overview on the assignments of the HUD funding for community investment or community development block grant, the Home Investment Partnership, as well as the Emergency Solutions Grant. If we can go to the next slide, and Jamie, it's all you.
Thank you, Alicia. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Mayor and committee, for having me. This is my first city council meeting. So we're starting off with the CDBG grants. So for 2025, we're looking at about $2,671,379. Program income, we're estimating at $100,000, and total for the community development block grant, we're looking at about $2,771,379. So the CDBG grant consists of, the Community Investment Affordable Housing Program, public service operations that'll be on site at our properties across the city, different home repair loan programs for essential or minor. The minor home repairs, looking at more like drywall, paint, leaks, light fixtures, things of that nature. And more of the essential home repairs will be, your roof repairs, major plumbing, foundational issues, windows. And we're looking at housing, counseling, education classes. That's going to be your first time home buyers classes, both in English and Spanish. We're both doing now for the city. And financial counseling opportunities, whether it be budgeting or debt relief for those home buyers, just preparing them for their first home. So that would be CDBG, and then we go into the home grants. That's going to be for 2025. We're looking at about $1,058,756. Match at about $264,689. And the program income at about 500 grand. So total for home, we're looking at for 2025, about $1,823,445 total for home grants. And then for home, kind of goes in line with the CDBG grants, with the community investment, financing and affordable housing development across the city. This will tailor more towards housing counseling, again, going into the first-time home buyers, financial literacy counseling, pre-purchase, reverse mortgage, and foreclosure prevention. Of course, trying to keep home buyers in their homes if we can. And just the home buyer education courses. Again, that's the first-time home buyers for both English and Spanish we're doing for the city. Lastly, we have the ESG grants, which will be our Emergency Solutions Grants Program. There we're looking at a smaller amount compared to the CDBG and the home grant, about $230,640. No match and zero program income. So again, that'll be the total at that $230,640 for the ESG grant. Here, the focus is obviously, quickly sheltering our homeless and getting them to the navigation center, which we are currently in the process of getting set up here in Aurora. So the HUD total with CDBG, home, and ESG combined for 2025, we're looking at that $4,825,464 total amount for HUD. And that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. And any questions? Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Bergen.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I always get confused on these CDBG and the home and so forth, but in attachment A on the CDBG, it has administrative costs capped at 20% of the grant. So that seems high to me. Is that in line typically with the administrative cost?
It is in line, yes.
Okay, and then who administers that?
We administer that through the Housing and Community Development Division. It is also our smallest grant. And unfortunately, it doesn't cover the admin costs that we actually need to be able to administer the entirety of the funding. It is one of the most complicated grants, but with only $260,000 or so. It is high percentage wise, but when it comes down to the dollar amount, it's actually not that high.
But it's staff that is part of the city of Aurora, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I guess so there's administrative costs for personnel that we're already paying for out of the regular general fund budget? Am I not understanding it?
The admin costs that we have for all of the HUD funding sources covers the admin cost or covers the salaries for the division. We don't have general funds.
Oh, okay, okay. And then out of which one of the, what, for the ESG, what was the total amount that goes in ESG funding for this new year?
So for 2025 is $230,640.
And how does that compare to last year?
It's about the same.
About the same? Okay, but that is where we can actually help people that are experiencing homelessness, right?
Correct.
Out of
Yeah.
the ESG monies?
Yeah, and so this is a small grant that we get that goes towards homelessness. However, it's not the only funding that we're utilizing for homelessness. We have, as the marijuana funding revenue goes towards that, and Jessica is online and can speak more to that. So there are other funding sources. This is the ESG grant is specifically targeted to supporting us in sheltering those that are experiencing homelessness. So we do assign all of it to homelessness.
Okay, so where does rental assistance, out of these categories, where's rental assistance come from?
Rental assistance, we were administering it through a separate federal grant that we got through federal treasury, which was also ARPA funding. But we are out of funds. We're fully spent on rental assistance, also mortgage assistance. So those are not here.
Okay, and I thought, maybe I'm wrong, I thought we had rental assistance monies prior to ARPA from years ago that came out of something.
So ARPA funding, yes, but we're fully spent.
No, I know that, but before ARPA ever existed, I thought we did, as a city, have rental assistance. Was that coming out of a different fund that I'm getting confused on?
There is some rental assistance.
Oh, someone's, Emma, oh, yeah,
This
Emma.
is Jessica, and Emma can answer too. We did use some HUD funds at a time. Before COVID, we had a program called Home of Your Own and things like that, where we were covering some of that. We have not utilized that program since the pandemic started. So that's not something we have budgeted for spending this year. We do still have the Flex Fund, which is marijuana funds, not HUD funds.
Okay. Okay, the Flex funds.
And the Flex Fund doesn't really cover rental assistance. It's deposit assistance and things like that.
Okay.
Emma, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, it does cover a little bit of, it's only rental assistance if someone's already behind. We can't pay ahead for folks. But it is primarily deposit assistance is what we use it for.
Okay. Well, that's it for me. I don't know, maybe I needed more kind of an idea of where, I guess more specifically where the money goes, but that might be in the backup as well. So anyway, thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, and I'm happy to provide more information on the programs that we have, but yeah, just let me know if you'd like more information.
Yeah, I might just do a one-on-one and get a little bit more educated on it. Thank you.
Happy to. Yes, absolutely.
Councilmember Lawson.
Thank you, Mayor. So thank you so much for this presentation. I have a question on attachment B. This is H23. So when we're talking about the program income, specifically, can you just tell me, it's in 2023 or 2024 original approved July 2023. Looks like we're going to 400, but then we're going to go up to 500,000. When we're talking about the programs, is that specifically for the programs? Because I know you have to have people to work the programs, but is this part of this amount of money included with the FTE or just the programs themselves? If that question makes sense.
I believe your question is the amounts, so like, for example, with CDBG, the 2.7 million, is that entitlement plus the admin cost? And the answer is yes. So this is the total amount that we have to provide for the programs and to cover admin cost.
Okay, can I just do a follow-up, Mayor? So how many, in this particular scenario here, how many programs does this cover? So is it just the ones that you kind of mentioned? So when you say in program income, how many programs is that covering within this home investment partnership here?
And actually, program income is a little bit different than the grant. So the grant that came in from HUD for CDBG is 2.6 million. That $100,000, for example, on the slide that's on the screen right now, that is how much program income we received and that we can allocate to budget in 2025. Program income is funding that comes back to the city from money that we have invested in the past and that we're able to utilize and reinvest in back in the community. So it's not necessarily, it goes to programs, but we just include all of it, the program income and the entitlement to go to the programs that we are going to administer in the year. So in this case, 2025.
Okay, so it's more like a reinvestment type situation where it goes back in. Okay, thank you so much for that clarity. And just another question for you. I know you mentioned a lot of programs that are referencing new home buyers, keeping homeowners in their homes as well. Do you guys do programs too, which I think is kind of important in this economy as well, on refinancing? How does that work? People who have homes, what is the pros and the cons of that? Do you guys kind of offer some outlier programs that could really be helpful to people who are in certain situations as well?
Most of that information is covered in our first-time homebuyer education courses. We had paused those during COVID and we brought those back last year. We were very successful with the classes. This year, we actually implemented the classes in Spanish also just because of the demand. But yes, a lot of that information is covered during our first-time homebuyer education courses and then during those financial literacy counselings, one-on-one counseling sessions, they are counseled on that specifically for the individual and their circumstances.
Okay. Thank you so much. That's all of my questions.
Okay. Councilmember Hancock has her hand up.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm trying to, I might sound redundant here, but I just wanted to understand when you talked about staffing, how many people are actually dedicated to working on this program, and are they just dedicated to this one piece, or are they just staff that happen to have this as an assignment?
Yes, so the division is a little understaffed right now. Right now we're a total of 12 people. We're down 2 individuals, so that's how many people we have on the division that administer these programs.
So when you were talking about, if I could follow up, when you're talking about the ESG programs, because I'm looking here in this backup on H20. 4, it looks like ESG admin, that it seems kind of, that number seems kind of small. When Councilmember Berger was talking about the 20% overhead for administration, are these people specifically dedicated to just this?
In the case of the ESG grant, the amount of admin costs that we cover, that we're able to cover with that, yes, the individuals only processing ESG administrative duties. I do want to emphasize that that we do also utilize the marijuana funding, and there's other costs that we're able to, or there's other admin cost areas that we're able to utilize. And Jessica and Emma can speak more to that.
Councilmember Hancock, though, just to be real clear, the folks that are funded with CDBG admin are only working on HUD programs, and they actually have to sign, timesheets saying that that's what they're working on. So that's their primary duty. CDBG has the highest admin at 20%. ESG is at 10% for admin. You know, typically when we do have a grant, it's anywhere between 10 and 20 when we're giving funding out to the community. But that 20% has been standard over time for CDBG.
Okay. I would be really interested to know how that is specifically directed, who's getting it, how much they're getting. You know, I'd like to drill down a little bit more on that. I know this is kind of a broad overview, but I'd like to see us get a little bit more in the weeds from my perspective on how, and maybe that might be a separate conversation. But this is a lot of money, and I just want to make sure that the monies that we're spending are actually hitting the targets that we wanted to hit. And having the outcomes that we want, where people are being successful and, you know, actually being improved by this. I think it's a good idea, but I want to make sure that we're being as effective as we possibly can with the utilization of these dollars. And I know people are leaning a lot on the marijuana funds, but I know that those projected dollars are going down. So how are we going to manage this as those marijuana dollars go down, so that it still is an effective program? That's my comment about that.
Yeah, and I'm happy to provide more information. There's also a report that comes out at the end of the year reporting to HUD the accomplishments. So we're happy to share that, and I'm happy to go over that with you if that would be helpful.
It would. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Mayor Kaufman.
Yeah, what is the proposed budget for flex funds for the next year, and what are the sources of flex funds again?
Mayor Kaufman, the source of the flex fund is marijuana dollars, and projected for our budget. I'll have to look that up, and I can pull that number in just a minute.
We are also planning on taking questions that we need to go and work on, and we'll create the packet just like we do every year, and we can put it into that packet.
Good. And I think that I think the industry will be stabilized once. I know it's going through an administrative process in terms of reclassifying. I think going from I can't remember what it's called, classification, I think 1 to a 3 will help a lot. The industry a lot. Okay, is there further questions? Okay. Thanks so much. I appreciate all you do. I really do. And obviously we've got some questions to follow up on.
Yes,
Great.
thank you.
Anybody have anything else on housing and community development? Okay, thanks. We'll go to Citizens Water Advisory Commission. And then we'll take a short break after that.
Thank you, Mayor. I am Janet Marlowe. I am the chair of the Citizens Water Advisory Commission. The committee consists of 9 members, 7 residential and 2 commercial customers, and was formed by City Council in 2004 by ordinance and amended in 2023. Our members are myself as chair, Richard Eason, Angie Binder, Tom Coker, Dennis DeChamp, John Dingus, Greg Gibson, Marcus Harper, and Daniel Widdick. The purpose of the commission is to provide counsel and give suggestions and recommendations to the water department and city council on all phases of budget, departmental work plans, operational needs, strategic planning, long-range capital improvements, and financial planning. Next slide, please. As you can see, we had 3 meetings that were wrapped around the budget and the review. Next slide, please. Our impact trends. Many of the same factors that impacted rates and fees last year continue to impact them this year. significant capital projects, including fee-based projects to expand our system, rate-based projects to maintain the aging infrastructure. Inflation, unfortunately, continues to impact materials, chemicals, and utility costs. Regulatory impacts, including PFAS, which requires more frequent replacement for granule active carbon, and lead service line identification and replacement program that will impact Northwest Aurora, for several years, requires large investments. We're not alone in feeling these financial burdens. Metro Water Recovery, which treats Aurora's sewage, is increasing their fees to all connections on the Front Range by 10% per year for multiple years to come. They too are seeing increased costs due to aging infrastructure. Next slide. As you can see, many materials and utilities used by Aurora Water cost faster than the CPI. Next slide. Aurora Water is proposing a 5% increase in water revenues. The costs are spread across the multiple customer classes differently, depending on how their use impacts the system. For 2025, residential rates would increase by an average of 3%, while irrigation accounts would increase by 8% since that water cannot be reused. Multifamily rates are predominant for in-water use, which can be recaptured and reused in our prairie water system by 4%, and commercial rates by 7%. Finally, hydrant water, which can be used for construction, soil compact, and dust mitigation, will rise by 10%. Next slide. Oh, no, go back. Oh, no, you're good, Greg. Thank you. Metro Water Recovery will be rehabbing their infrastructure, which has been in place since the mid-1960s. They also need staff for their new treatment facility, the Northern Treatment Plant, as they are now taking flows from northern areas, including the newer sections of Aurora. This is resulting in a 10% increase to Aurora. Stormwater rates, which have remained unchanged for several years, will see a 3.5% increase to allow for system upgrades and rehabilitation. Next slide. Residential water rates are tiered to encourage conservation. The principle of the more you use, the more you pay continues to be effective. Tier 1, which provides enough water for most household indoor use, is still unchanged. Please remember that water rate tiers are stepped, so our customers pay the rate for that amount of water and step into the next tier only for the water above that threshold. Next slide. Multifamily, irrigation, and commercial water rates will increase to reflect the impact on the system, especially if their water use removes the ability to reuse the water in prairie waters. These accounts have billing allocations. The monthly service charges for each account type will increase based on the percentage increase proposed for their rates. Next slide. As noted, sewer rates will increase to meet Metro Water Recovery's increase in charges. Stormwater rates will increase for the first time in several years. However, they have a small impact on most customers' bills. Next slide. While no one likes rate increases, including everybody on the committee, we need to maintain a viable and safe water, sewer, and storm system. So we must keep up with our many needed improvements. A predictable set of increases to keep up with the needs is preferable to differentiating projects and rehabilitation work, which can only lead to higher increases when projects can no longer be put off. There are examples of other Front Range water providers' proposed rate increases. Some, like Broomfield and Brighton, are showing critical projects in the past and now are paying the price. Next slide. This is one of our favorite slides. Even with the proposed rate increases, the typical Aurora water customer total bill for water, sewer, and stormwater is still well below most utilities on the front range. One thing to note is that the increase for other utilities that were noted on the previous slide have not been included in these comparisons.
Okay.
Next slide. Development fees, also called tap fees, will increase for several reasons. One is the cost of acquiring new water, which continues. The other is a change in methodology for multifamily development, which has been presented by Aurora Water at the Water Policy Committee. This change requires a redistribution of costs across the other customer classes. These increases only apply to new developments. Next slide. Sewer development fees reflect the cost for new infrastructure on this slide. Next slide. Storm drain connection fees will see a minor increase. Next slide. Allocation accounts. As stated earlier, multifamily, irrigation, and commercial accounts are assigned a billing allocation. This allocation has evolved over time, which has resulted in many inequalities between older accounts and new accounts. Aurora Water will be using a simple method of calculating the allocation that properly aligns with the typical use for each customer class. Next slide. The Commission's recommendations is we support the proposed water and wastewater budgets, including the need for a 3% increase in water revenue through rate increases. We also support the proposed $1 per month stormwater increase and increases in development fees for both water and stormwater. And that concludes my report. Any questions?
Questions? Well, first of all, let me, so it looks like when you do the comparison, we didn't include probably everybody's doing increases. And so those other increases aren't yet realized, correct?
Correct.
So we're understated, where we are. And I think that's impressive. And then also I want to thank you and the water department as a whole for doing increases as necessary every year. If they are for those that are necessary, because I think it's better to do that than to wait a number of years and then have a big increase. And I know any increase is tough on our ratepayers, but I think that I know Westminster waited a long time and then had to do some very significant increases, and the ratepayers were out there with pitchforks and torches, and life is pretty tough for the mayor and council. So better to do it on an annual basis if when increases are necessary. And thank you so much for all your work. It's really important stuff. Questions from council? Councilmember Bergen.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Janet and committee for the presentation. And like you said, nobody likes to be in favor of rate increases, but they are necessary, obviously, as we invest in our water infrastructure. And sitting on the Water Policy Committee with our chair, Councilmember Sundberg, we've asked a lot of these questions, hard questions as well. If it's absolutely necessary that we do these increases. And I know at one point, one of the questions, and it might have been Councilmember Lawson, but asking about, could we defer 1 year? And I think the answer was, if we do that, we end up in a situation where you actually end up with a much higher percentage, which I think what the mayor alluded to was, I think it's Brighton, or one of those entities that is going to look at a 50% increase now because they had deferred maintenance for so long. So anyway, just want to say thank you. And I do also agree that correcting the allocation accounts is really important.
And we've had some very lively discussions over rate increases, so.
Great. Further questions, comments?
Mayor,
I'm sorry, Councilmember Lawson. Oh,
Hancock.
Councilmember Hancock, Councilmember
That's
Hancock.
okay. I'm not on camera, so you don't know. But because I'm having technical difficulties. But Janet, great job on this report. And I also sit on the Water Policy Committee with Council members Lawson and Sunberg. And I think that you've done a great job here. But what I'm thinking in terms of helping people to understand why these increases are necessary, it's really going to be incumbent upon us to communicate that to the public. I think people just think, oh crap, my water bill's going up again, and they're mad about it, but they don't understand the design and construction on the Wild Horse Reservoir, the contracts that we're working on bringing water from southern Colorado, and the expansion of prairie waters and all the things that we're doing to improve the quality of water and the ethical use of the water that we're doing in our city. I think, just launching some kind of a communication strategy would be extremely helpful. I had the opportunity to go to stand at the bottom of the Wild Horse Reservoir recently, and I was just gobsmacked at the potential that this will have for our city as it's implemented. And, compared to other cities, I think Aurora is doing an amazing job in our management of the water and our management of how the fees are assessed and what we're doing. We're squeezing every bit of juice out of every dollar that we're getting. And I think it is important for us to communicate that to people so that they understand that we're not just, having a party with the money. You know what I'm saying? We are doing stuff that really is going to help us in the long term. We're playing the long game here, 20, 30 years into the future. So I applaud you and the team for all the hard work that you've done. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Greg Baker and his team with communications, the conservation people, I mean, they're out there all the time talking about the water and how, what good stewards we are of the water and what good stewards we are of the money, and buying water and finding water and some of the most innovative ways that the city has gone and found water. So we continue as a committee to also put that out there also with everybody that we can possibly talk to.
Further questions or comments?
Mayor, Councilmember Murillo.
Councilmember Murillo and then Councilmember Sunberg.
Thank you. Oh, sorry if you were first, Councilmember Sunberg. Yeah, I won't belabor the point. Just want to echo that, it might feel like we keep seeing increases and rate increases. And I acknowledge that, there has been a lot of consideration for, the approach to different parts of the city. So I know Ward 1 has really been able to, receive some consistency, and overall we'll need to continue to increase rates. But I think that's the appropriate and frankly the responsible thing to do, to kind of have smaller increases than, one large increase, even though it might feel a lot. So I echo the communication strategy and the work that needs to get done as well. So thanks for all your work.
Thank you.
Further questions or comments? Councilmember Sunberg.
Oh, just real quick, Mayor, you may have seen Marshall Brown's comment in the chat that Broomfield is facing a proposed 50% increase in their rates.
So
just to throw that out there.
Okay, further questions or comments? Seeing none, Janet, thank you so much for great work. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Is the mayor still on?
He did say he wanted to take a brief
Apparently
break.
he took a break and left us here to work.
So if council would like, who wants to step up as I do not see Councilmember Zvonik on here, so the mayor pro tem, does that fall to you, Councilmember Bergen?
I'm back and we will.
Oh, there we
He's
go.
back and let's see, the time is 6:10. Let's take a break till 6:20. We will return at 6:20. 2024. It's back in session, and we are on the city manager's budget presentation. Item number 2A, introduction to the 2025 proposed budget. City manager, Jason Batchelor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, council, for being here. Thanks, everybody else. We've got lots of staff on here. So we'll walk through the presentation here. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please, Greg. This is our agenda. I will keep my introductory remarks brief. Greg will then give you kind of an overview of the overall budget, what we've done, and then we'll go through the council and commission appointees, and then we'll go through the departments, and we'll go through those by kind of department group. So myself, the DCMs, and Marshall, and then we will stop for questions when we get there by each DCM group. So next slide. So the 2025 focus, so our 2025 budget is relatively a status quo budget. We don't have a lot of ads in the budget. We do have some significant investments, primarily in our employees, for making sure that we continue to stay up with our market. We have funding for the collective bargaining agreements that council approved earlier this year, but we do have some limited ads. Most of those ads are in the public safety area, so we do have some critical ads for the fire department, for the police department, and then with HR, within the HR department, but specifically focused on our public safety hiring team. And then we do have funding for the Hart Court as approved by council earlier this year. So that's in the general fund. In our other funds, we do have some other targeted ads, particularly in development and review, and some of our parks related funds, as well as our capital projects funds. And as we go through the presentation, we will highlight all of those ads for you all and answer any questions you may have about them. Next slide. So the 2026 and beyond, so we're still out of balance a little bit in the budget. As you've seen that for 2026, that number's come down. I think since we talked to you earlier this summer, that number's now a little over 11 million. And then, so we'll continue to need to look for ways to balance that 2026 and beyond. And then I want to note that 2026 budget does include, in our projection, does include funding for some critical additions. It includes funding for the staffing of the fire station out at the Aurora Highlands, and it does include funding for restaffing of the Office of the Independent Police Monitor. Council removed that a couple years ago when we entered into the consent decree. We talked about the idea that we really only needed one monitor at a time. We will exit the consent decree in early 2027. And the intent of adding that staffing back in 2026 is so that we can advertise, hire, and onboard them probably mid-year towards the end of the year, and allow for some handover between the consent decree monitor and the new Office of the Independent Police Monitor, so that when the consent decree ends in the first part of 2027, we have that Office of the Independent Police Monitor staffed and ready to go. So that's included in the 2026 budget. So we've had some questions on what's in there. I wanted to make sure we highlight those two things. And before I hand it over to Greg, Councilmember Sundberg, I saw you come off camera there and didn't know if you had a question.
Sorry, no, I was having a little dinner there.
Sorry, didn't mean to. There we go. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Greg and let Greg go through this. And again, go ahead and stop Greg, or you can ask Greg questions at the end of his portion before we launch into the council appointees and commission appointees.
Great. Thank you very much, Jason. This feels like dinner and a show, so this is good. All right. A little bit of a more detail into the approach to the 2025 budget. By the way, this is going to sound very similar and familiar to you because it's the same information we talked to you about during the one-on-ones. All right. The revenues are actually increasing from the previous pro forma, but the expenditures are increasing more. All right. So when we talk about 2026, it really is an expenditure issue. The base includes the wages, the inflation, especially in risk, insurance, and then our contract costs, especially technology. For the second year in a row, we didn't have what we call a SLAR process, or a service level adjustment request, where we open up and ask all the departments what they need and then bring it through. We did not do that. There are amendments totaling $658,000. There's a little bit of a negative ongoing and about $775,000 one time. You're going to hear a lot more about this once we get you to start talking to the cool people of this presentation. And then there's going to be a net zero reorganization. If you look through the department pages, you'll see a lot of amendments that have the same title of a net zero reorganization. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that here in a second. We do have a balanced 2025 budget. We're using $5.1 million worth of one-time funds. Once again, 2026 is still at a balance by about $11.5 million. So because everybody loves pie charts, we're going to go through a couple of these. These are all fund sources, so all the funds in the city. For anybody who remembers me talking through at your ward meetings, I go through these slides. Taxes are about 30%. Most of those are in the general fund, your sales and use taxes. Your charges for service sitting there at 24%. Most of that's going to be in your water and wastewater funds for water bills. And then in this, similar to last year, there was a large borrowing proceeds, 29%, and that's all in the water and wastewater funds. For all appropriations, the general fund makes up about 38% of the total. After that, you look at water and wastewater, you add up the capital and the operating, it's sitting at about 43%. Everything kind of drops after that. On our capital side, the capital is $2.3 billion now in the 5-year plan. A vast majority of that's going to be in water and wastewater. 3/4 of the capital for the city is in water and wastewater, and Marshall's going to speak to that a little bit. Capital projects is sitting at 9.7%. Laura's going to be bringing up a couple of the pertinent items that are part of that as well. General fund sources, we continue to rely on people buying something. If you look at sales tax sitting at 57, capital related use tax sitting at 7, and then auto use tax, that is going on 70% of the money that we're waiting for somebody to go buy something out in the world. So the economy and watching the economy is very important to us. Property tax is still at 11%. The last time sales tax was increased was 31 years ago. The last time property tax was increased was 24 years ago. In terms of appropriations, this hasn't changed much. It's the same as before. If you look at what the city spends most of its general funds on, it is on public safety. So if you take courts and legal and police and Aurora 911 and fire, you're about 55% for those 4 departments. It drops off after that in the other places. If you have any questions on any of this, I can get you more information, or it's also in your budget book. On the general fund revenue side, this is just a rehash of the fact that we use the Leeds School of Business to do our projections for about 80% of the revenue in the general fund, including the sales tax, auto use, building materials, other use, property taxes. They give us several different forecast scenarios. And then this year, we're doing something different. We're being a little less conservative than we have in the past, in that we're using their baseline scenario. But in the past, we would give it a little, like a 10% haircut. Instead of 5%, if they said 5%, we'd say, great, we're going to go at 4.5, because their baseline scenario is basically a 50-50 coin flip. Half the times it'll be better, half the time it'll be worse. This time we're using the baseline scenario without the haircut. And so this is just a picture of what we're talking about. They give us a baseline, a pessimistic, and an optimistic scenario. And then we take that and we'll adjust it a little bit for that. And I'm going to give you two examples of how we adjust for the baseline. They give us property tax, but we know that we're Tabor limited. So their property tax number isn't going to work for us. We already know that. And so we don't use their property tax projection. All right. Another great example of a way that we would take their numbers and then use some of our homegrown experience. We started using their auto use tax. And their auto use tax, we're actually kind of down in auto use tax this year for the first time in quite a while. We're up just a little bit in sales tax and down a little bit in auto use tax. So we kind of flip-flopped some money to where it was a net zero, but fit better to what reality was actually sitting at through the June, July timeframe. So this is an interesting thing. Recent sales tax growth. We talked to the members of M&F about this last month. You look at 2024 and you go, holy moly, that's crazy, out of control. I can't tell up or down. But it turns out there actually is a bit of a reason for this. And it has to do with the fact that our tax and licensing team is cleaning up some accounts. And there were a lot of businesses that were filing quarterly, but really should be, they're giving us enough money where they should be filing monthly. And so we didn't see this in the beginning, but we're starting to see this now. You'll notice January is down, but February is up and March is up. April's down, May is up, June is up. July is down. All of those are quarterly filing months. So the movement of the people from quarterly filing to monthly filing has caused this thing that we can kind of watch and control now. I'll give you a precursor. August just finished, didn't get done in time for this. August is up. So we're sitting at 3%. Our projection says 4.5%. We think that by the end of the year, we kind of did a thing going, okay, if we continue this trend, we'll be right at that 4.5%. So right where we need to be. That's good news for us, and we think that we're seeing a trend and can follow that trend.
Councilmember Bergen had a question.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I just real quick on the tax and licensing where you said when they hit a certain threshold, they move to a monthly reporting instead of a quarterly. What is that threshold?
I will get that for you.
Okay, you can get it later. Thank
And
you.
now the mayor has his hand up. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Greg, on the auto use tax, is that when somebody just the one-time tax when somebody purchases a vehicle, when somebody just purchases a vehicle, or is it part of the registration fees?
It's when they purchase a vehicle. So basically, long story short, if you're in Aurora and you're gonna buy a car outside of Aurora, you're gonna pay use tax. If you're in Aurora and you're gonna buy a car in Aurora, you're gonna pay a sales tax. It's the exact same thing. It's just the location of where that is. And so it acts like a sales tax. It is basically a sales tax.
But we
Mayor,
don't just, yeah.
I was gonna say, I think you're referencing specific ownership tax, and so which is collected
Right.
at time of registration, and that
different.
comes in, we don't book it in auto use tax. I believe we book that in. Do we break that out, Greg, or do we book that in other governmental revenue?
Jackie or Bill, would you have that?
Isn't it a fee?
SOT comes in a different account, but what Greg said is right. The sales tax, it is sales tax on cars, but it's paid at the time of registration. So if you buy a car outside of Aurora, you don't pay it at the time you buy it. You pay it when you register it in your registration fees, but it comes in as use tax.
Is specific ownership tax its own tax stream?
Yes, it's own.
Okay.
It's its
Okay.
own
So
tax.
it's completely separate, and you could see that in the budget book.
Okay. And then, but we don't draw anything off registration fees, right?
No, sir.
Okay, just want to confirm that. Thank you.
Councilmember Sundberg.
Thank you. Forgive me if you covered this, but just so I understand, going back to 2022, there's a 9.4%. That's an increase from the previous year.
That's an increase from from coming out of COVID. Correct. So some pretty strong times coming out of.
And then leveled off to 5% 2023, 2024 could be a little higher once
we've projected 4.5, and we're feeling fairly confident in that. I mean, I'll tell you what, you're talking about some big numbers and awfully close percentages, but yeah, we feel like we're on the ball in that.
So looking at 2024 to 2022, it's quite a difference. That's the state of the economy, or what do you attribute that to?
Jason, did you look like you were about to say something?
I was just I think part of this is what you're looking at is growth on growth. And so it's, when you have that 9.4% growth, it's harder to grow off that number. And so I think it's just, so yes, 5% is less than that 9.4, but it still means we brought in 5% more revenue than we'd ever brought in. This year, we anticipate bringing in 4.5% more sales tax than we've ever brought in. So it's just, at some point, it's just tough to continue to get growth on growth like that. It's just, and that's really what we're looking at.
That makes
Very
sense. It's a positive trend still.
Right, right.
Gotcha.
And our future projection doesn't have these 9% in there, by the way. We're expecting it to, be nice and calm throughout the 5 year, but without a recession, so that's kind of a downside. Anything else from this? All right, then let me start focusing on.
No, but maybe this is the lead's question, but I think all indicators that to some extent the economy is going to slow down, and how is that reflected respectively in next year's?
Yeah, if you go back to the projection, Greg, you can kind of see. So this is one where you look at that orange line. That's a pessimistic. So that kind of dips into the negative in 2025. You look at the other lines, you kind of see them generally trending to the right, which exactly that. They're showing slowing growth, which is, sort of a cooling of the economy. Their pessimistic would show a true recession in 2025 with a bit of a bounce out of that. But the other ones, they're generally showing, I think, what you're reflecting, Mayor, which is sort of a cooling of the economy, not a recession, but a cooling of the economy.
Exactly.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about the expenditures of the budget. The base budget of the city of the general fund is $541 million. There were $24.7 million of base adjustments, some negative adjustments to remove some one-times that were in 2024. We also had about $1.7 million ongoing in the spring supplemental for 2024. So both of those have affected the base budget. Jason brought up the personal services adjustments. That's the biggest increase in here, $18.2 million in personal services adjustments. This does take into account the agreements that we've made this year with the negotiations with police and fire. And then Jason will speak more to that here in a couple slides. 17.6 million in other adjustments. The vast majority, that's actually the increase in the CPF transfer. So that's that number. It's over half of that. Other funds had some transfer adjustments as well. We had utility changes, fleet changes, risk increases. All of these we've kind of brought up to you before. And then the department-specific contractual increases, which this year were higher than they have been in the past. And so it's one of the things that we've got to make sure that we're getting a handle on. All of the inflationary costs that are hitting all of the nation, we're seeing those same increases, right? So a company comes up and they go, oh, you're gonna have to pay 15% more for that same software product, because they're having to pay 10% more for their people and such like that. There's $660,000 in net amendments. There's actually some ups and downs in this. So as you talk to Jason and the DCMs, there's going to be some ups and downs. A couple of things I want to talk about. Ongoing budget reductions of 2.5 million are sitting in this. One includes the transfer of all the Aurora 911 general fund FTE. We're moving all of them over to the E911 fund, but we've actually, in doing that, we've built a little bit of savings for us in the general fund. And then also, we already talked to you about the fact that we've basically doubled our vacancy savings assumption. So that's also a negative budget. There's $3.2 million in additional appropriation. Most of that's going to be in public safety related amendments that Jason touched on, but you'll hear about it more. If you want to follow along in the book, attachment 8 on page B23 has a list of all the amendments. And then if you want to go into the departments, all the departments go into the details of their specific amendments. We are using $5.1 million worth of funds available, as I had said previously. Our ending funds available, we're projecting to have $97 million in ending funds available at the end of 2025. That is fully funding all of our reserves. All right, so the policy reserve, the TABORS reserve, fully funded. Your recession reserve is fully funded in that. And then the operating reserve is sitting at about 1.9%. The good news about this, we just recently got, and you all heard about it this year, good news for the city, got yet another bond increase, right? One of the main reasons for us getting these sorts of bond increases is how we treat our dollars, and how we treat our dollars conservatively, and how we treat our dollars fiscally. And the fact that we're fully funding our funds available is a testament to that.
Councilmember Bergen has her hand up.
Oh, yes, sorry about that.
Sorry, if you could go back one slide.
I can.
Just on the 17.6 million in the capital projects fund, does that include all the inflationary costs that we're seeing in our projects? Is that projected in that as well?
So that the 17.6 million isn't just the increase in the CPF. This increase in the CPF is about 9 million. And what that entails is, you remember Leeds gave us projections for building material use tax and other use tax and such. That's the effect of their increases, of their number changes. And so, yes, you're right. The capital costs keep going up and keep increasing, which means that the buying power of our dollars are worth less. But you'll see increases over in the capital project side to kind of account for that. This is just the revenue coming in from the general fund.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And when we get to, I'll tee up Laura here and just kind of put it on her radar for when we get to the CPF. But obviously the CPF continues to be one of the big things out of that is our road maintenance. And so when we brought the Build Up Aurora program to you all, one of the things that we talked about to council is we needed to keep up not only with growth, but also making sure that really we were maintaining a service level. And so part of that maintaining that service level is looking at those inflationary increases that you're talking about, council member. So just like Greg said, so if we need to do, 100 lane miles of road maintenance, we want to make sure that we're doing a good, accurate forecasting on what 100 lane miles of road maintenance is going to cost each year. And so that's where that's part of that work that we do. And then each year, as we have projects forecast, we do try and update them for construction estimates. Construction costs have been leveling off over the last probably nine months or so, but certainly coming out of 2023, they were very high. And so I see a few other hands up. Councilmember Lawson looks like she had hers up, but that's okay, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Did the mayor want to?
Oh, go ahead, Councilmember Lawson.
Thank you, Mayor. So I have a question just in general. When you guys do these projections and the Leeds does the projections, tomorrow the Fed is going to make hopefully a significant Fed cut. How does that impact our budget, and how does that play into the projections that you have here?
So that's a really good question. I would say that they may or may not have an effect on the projections that Leeds did. And the reason I'm telling you that is that they may have already baked some of this into assumptions that are part of what they're looking at. I can tell you that last year, when the Leeds gave us their projection, or maybe it was 2 years ago, Leeds gave us their projections, the Ukraine war was just starting. And I don't know if the Ukraine war was baked into any projection that they had. At any given time, if you're looking at like a Fed rate change, that would probably be positive for our sales tax, because that means that more money that people can go out and buy things. But it's going to be sort of minuscule on the. It might change it from 4% to 4.1.
Yeah.
Something like that. So I don't think it would change the story of their numbers unless it was something pretty drastic.
Yeah, Greg, what is our reserves right now?
Sure. Our reserves are right here. Figuring 2025 ending funds available. Polish reserve is sitting there at $44.5 million. The Tabor reserve is sitting at 15.4. The recession reserve is sitting at 27.1. And then the operating reserve, which is the most usable of the funds of those, sitting at about 10 million, which is around 1.9% at the moment.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I could, let's just focus on that recession reserve. So as Greg told you, Greg, let's go back to that Leeds things, the Leeds forecast. So you'll see that orange line there. That scares me and Greg. That makes us nervous, because that's not in our numbers. Our numbers are, that sort of brownish line, the baseline, right? So in the event we hit a recession, Council has wisely told us to go ahead and set aside some funds. And so if we see something actually going into a recessionary territory, we'll come back to Council in accordance with that resolution that you all passed to tell us to set that recession reserve aside. And that will help us weather an actual recession rather than a cooling off. And so while we have $94 million, again, about a third of that is set aside for council to help us kind of weather a recession, which is really good news for stability of services, for not having to face drastic swings in service level. So we appreciate that, and we think that was wise of council to do that. And quite frankly, I think is part of the reason that we continue to receive some of those rating upgrades. I think those rating agencies see the strong fiscal management from our elected leaders, from your professional staff, and I think it's reflected in those rating increases. So,
are you speaking to a formal recession of
a formal recession? So that orange line to me, yeah, that orange line represents what you would call a formal recession. That's not anywhere in our forecast. We're kind of right now projecting a smoothing. Now, in the event that our sales tax collections start, actually declining and month over month, and we were to start to see the an actual decline in revenues, that's when we would come back to council. Greg, let's go to that, those reserves, and that's when we would be back to council to talk about how to use those recession reserves. So we have $27 million set aside to help us in the event that we actually enter a recession.
Question.
Councilmember Bergen.
Yeah, so back on the reserves, because I'm trying to remember when the 2008 recession happened, 2007, 2008. I assume we dipped into reserves, right, during that time frame?
No, I'll tell you, we did not. We did not have a recessionary reserve set up there.
You didn't have one?
We did not have a recession reserve set up. That's my recession, as Greg likes to remind me. That started right when I got here, so that one's my fault. And so no, we did not have that. So we implemented a 10-point plan at that point. We did hiring freezes. We did a number of other steps, but it was probably far more drastic that in the hopefully unlikely event, but if we were to see one with this $27 million, that would really help us kind of weather that and kind of smooth that out. That's not to say that we wouldn't take other actions, but quite frankly, that $27 million gives us some time and space to develop those and probably avoid some more drastic measures.
Well, and then also, it would also affect how long the recession lasts, because if it's a recession that lasts 2 years and not just 1 year, you're having to, split that amount over time as well. And just real quick, because Bob Oliva did a retail presentation at PED recently and talked about how people are going out to eat less. They're even eating less of the fast food because fast food prices have gone up so much. So that, and then I have a friend in the real estate market, hopefully that person's not accurate, but saying that we are very likely to have a housing crash. So, I'm always cognizant of those economic factors of, rising prices. And then if we truly do have a housing market crash, that we are set, with the reserves to be able to weather the storm, not just for 1 year, but a couple of years.
Yep.
Thank you.
And we would get a feel for that, right? So this recession reserve, and of course, all of this is hindsight. This recession reserve would have gotten us through 2 of the last 3 recessions. The one I did back in 2001, not the one Jason did. Jason did a really good job with his Great Recession, but then also the Tabor recession. This would have covered it. But then again, you don't know. So we would take all of the tools that Jason was talking about in that toolbox to get through any recession, and not just cover it with money.
Oh, and real quick, that would also probably affect capital projects that we're funding?
Absolutely. It's all part of a system. So one thing's got to affect another, and it kind of depends on where your shortfall is. Back in 2008, building the control use tax had basically bottomed out. That was the lowest point in our CPF plan, was in that time frame right there.
Thanks.
Anything else? All right, great questions. In terms of the longer term forecast, 2025 is balanced. 2026 is at a balance by $11.5 million. It is something that we're going to have to work with. It's something we're going to have to deal with. We will have a balanced 2026 budget. How we do it is still TBD, but But I do want to keep putting this in front of you and letting you know that that is something that's, as Jason likes to say, it's probably about 2 times as much as what we'd like it to be, and what I call bite size. A bite size close to in the second year of the plan is more in that 5 to 6 year, which is about 1%. This is around 2%. Okay. Just some numbers for you as you're looking through all funds operating amendments. 6.1 million. This is in all funds, by the way. $6.1 million in all funds ongoing. $3.4 million one time. That's about a 1.1% increase in the entire city, in the budget for the entire city. The major things that are in here in these different funds, you're going to hear about this later from Jason and the DCMs. Staffing wise, inclusive of the 11 FTE that were added as part of the spring supplemental this year, and then 28 more that are part of this budget book. It's an increase of 39 FTE, which is also, interestingly enough, a 1.1% increase in FTE staffing. A little bit about that reorganization that I was talking about. It's a net zero reorganization. There's multiple funds. So the general fund got affected, the development review fund got affected, but the fleet fund got affected. But each one was net zero within the fund, moving budget from one department to the other. We actually created a new department, the Development Services Department, which is picking up some development functions from other departments. A couple of other examples: risk is going to finance, fleet is going to general management from Public Works. There was other small moves as well. A great example: budget. Our strategy person, Letitia Callanan, who came and talked to you several times, she's now going over to general management. She wanted to stay here with me. I know she did, but it's all right. The department page amendments are going to have some more details on all of this reorganization. In the capital plan, there's $721 million of amendments. A vast majority of those amendments are going to be in the water and wastewater funds, and almost half of those amendments are actually in 2029, so the last year of the 5-year plan. If you want to go look at a summary of those amendments, you go look at attachment 12 on page B36. If you want to look at more narrative detail of all of the amendment detail, go to page G30 and you can start there. There's about 20 pages of amendments and what all of them entail. And with that, does anybody have any other questions of me before I give it back to Jason? All right. Hearing none.
Okay, so this is again just a reminder of the presentation order. So with that, we'll jump in here on the council and commission appointees. Like we started last year, I will do a brief summary of what's in the city manager's proposed budget. Then I'll turn it over to my fellow appointees. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, Greg.
Okay, sorry.
Then I'll turn it over to that appointee. We started that last year because I forget who it was, but somebody pointed out, why am I presenting the slide, Jason? It's your budget, and I didn't put those numbers in there, so that's what we're doing. So I'll just kind of walk you through the numbers, and then in this case, Jack will answer any questions you've got. So you can kind of see the numbers there. No staffing increases in the city attorney budget. They do have some savings this year. They are focusing those savings on some software for digital evidence storage. They're doing a failure to appear pilot using off-duty police officers to serve failure to appear summonses. And then they did have, obviously, some retirements and resignations, and so they've had some leave buyouts associated with that. And then on the water side, they're a little under budget due to some vacancy savings there. So, and then for 2025, again, their main increase is adding outside legal fees to staff the Hart Court, and then really just those same citywide pay and benefit increases and other citywide charges. So with that, Jack, anything I missed, please feel free to tell them I've screwed this up royally and you need to double your budget or whatever that may need to be. But Jack, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jason. I'd love to say that, yeah, you screwed it up big and I need to double the budget, but that's not the case. Just throwing it out there for any questions that council may have.
This might be a little too science fiction, but are we starting to see AI play a part yet to replace some positions within the city that could result in savings?
We've actually had that question, not necessarily specific to the city attorney, but other things. And so we actually have a small working group that's looking at some of those highly repetitive tasks sometimes that, things can, key off of. And so we're looking at that. We don't think that'll necessarily be huge savings in the short run, but it might help us, sort of as we see demand continue to increase and not have to maybe face some of those added staff. But we can certainly report back to council, but we do have a small working group looking at that.
Okay.
I have a question. Councilmember Laughlin. Yes. So
Sure.
we have 63, it looks like 63 FTEs. So my question to you is, when we have a lot of these cases, why do we do a lot of outsourcing if we have this many attorneys?
So there's always, well, if we weren't to outsource, the number of attorneys would have to grow exponentially. There's a number of reasons for that. On the civil litigation side, we have conflicts that when those defendants that we are obligated to defend in a civil litigation, along with the police department, have different interests in the case. The city attorney's office can't represent both because of the internal conflicts. A majority of those, the FTEs of the attorney FTEs are actually in the criminal division. So that there is very little outsourcing done on the criminal division. It's mostly done in the litigation and in the water fields. Some highly specialized things like eminent domain we use outside attorneys. Some very specialized litigation will use outside attorneys, but it's the rank and file that do most of the work.
So just to follow up, each of these attorneys do have a specialty within the city. I mean, this is kind of, I'm not trying to put anybody out of a job or anything like that. Looks like a mini law firm. And I really didn't know that we had this many attorneys, but yet and still, since I've been on council, and I understand what you just stated, but we outsource a lot. And I'm like, okay, what's up with this now that I'm seeing that? But thank you for that question. I still find it kind of questionable.
And I'd remind you that that's 66 FTEs, and then the 3 in water. Those are not all attorneys. Victim witness people, the support staff, the paralegals, all those are included in that. The total FTE count includes all full-time employees.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. I appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments? Jason?
All right, thanks. Going to the next one. This is in our court administration. So you can kind of see here the numbers for the court administration function. Similar in 2024, they're actually showing over the original budget by 1.4 million. That's because council approved a supplemental to add the 1.3 million that they had saved in 2023 back into for a capital projects fund. Candace might talk to you about that here when we turn it back over to her. And so you can kind of see just a couple other small supplemental items in the 2024 budget. The good news is, and again, I won't steal Candace's thunder, we've really implemented some great and successful pay and hiring strategies. Let Candace give you the good news on that. So that's 2024. And then in 2025, again, staffing levels are remaining constant. And then we did remove some of the one-time items from the 2024 budget. So the budget's actually going down from the projected. And then we do have an increase in here for our interpreter fees that are increasing, as we've talked about, from inflationary increases, as we continue to see the number of languages grow and the need for those. And then we are also growing the citywide risk and fleet charges. So that is it for 2025. With that, I'll turn over to Candace and let her kind of give you the other highlights.
Good evening, Council. Just a few highlights on our vacancies. Court-wide, we are down to 8 vacancies. One of them is actually the person is in an interim role, so we can't fill it. We have one position open in our marshals, and that was due to a promotion. And we have 2 open positions in probation, but because the DVs are going away, we have filled them with a VHBE. So those will remain open as we work through unwinding the DVs, and we have 3 openings in detention. Because of all the hiring that we've done in detention, we've had quite a bit of overtime. Thankfully for my leadership in our detention, Lance Alexander and Paul Olivia, we have changed our training for our new detention officers. So now it's 16 weeks. So we have overtime for the officers who are training because they're still working their regular shift as well. But we're really trying to improve, the quality of our officers. So we're committing to spending that time. So we're looking at developing a training budget. So we'll probably see that at some point. The only other thing that's on the horizon is that we have a need for some security updates on our front entrance. And the estimate on that is about 2.4 million. And we do have those carryover funds that Jason already talked about. So we'll be working together, Jason and I and his team, to come up with a design, to work on a budget, and to look for revenue. We're looking for revenue, to look for funding to cover that. And also we're looking to do minor repairs in our jury assembly room to make it ADA compliant, and that's about $95,000. Any questions?
Questions? No, thanks, Candace.
Mayor,
Appreciate it.
Mayor, I
Oh,
have
I'm
a
sorry.
question.
Councilmember Hancock.
I wanted to ask Candace about, you mentioned the front area of the courthouse and as people enter and exit there. Would you have a timeline on when you're going to start this project, or is it still in the discussion area?
Well, we have a preliminary estimate, and it's very preliminary. So Jason and I will work together to get, the engineers out and to get a more solid estimate. So we hope to start working on that pretty quickly, so that, we can address these security concerns. But we hope to come back in the spring for a supplemental request, but we're going to start working on it as soon as we can.
Further questions? Seeing none, thanks, Candace. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Jason?
Thank you, sir. And so this is on judicial. You get again, kind of see here, levels, staffing, and from, 23 through 2025. And then the 2025 budget does include funding for the Hart Court, which council approved earlier this year. So we've got that in there. And then our, the base is really just minor increases associated with those citywide pay and benefit increases, as well as some additional funding for relief staff, software, and other costs, as well as those citywide risk and fleet charges. So with that, I'll turn it over to Judge Day.
Thank you, Jason, Mayor, members of council. Happy to answer any questions that you might have. Just as he highlighted, the increase in relief staff, software subscription, business meeting costs. We're trying to get back to pre-COVID funding levels, since we have been operational fully since COVID. We were actually one of the first courts in the entire country to get back fully operational. So we're just asking for funding back to pre-COVID levels. So happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions of Judge Day? Seeing none, thanks, Judge. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Civil Service Commission, again, you see the 4 staff there. You kind of see some level funding. They're going to be a little over budget this year, associated with we've had a number of increased testing for civil service applicants. That's a good news side. They have had a number of appeals recently, so we've had a few hearings. So that will probably add to that overage that they're seeing on this year. And then for next year, really just looking to see those same base adjustments on the citywide staffing cost increases, but no other amendments beyond that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Matt and the commission.
Thank you, Jason. Good evening.
Please proceed.
Mayor and sorry, good evening, Mayor and City Council. Looks like I lagged out a second there. Nothing to add from what Jason proposed. I would note the 2022 difference from the 2023 does represent the reallocation of the background investigation unit to human resources. That was a change driven by the consent decree. But then afterwards, back on level plane with just base adjustments. So sorry for the lag out there, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions of staff? Councilmember Bergen.
Yes, thank you. So the decrease from 23 to 24 was the movement of the background checks to HR?
Yeah, so that was part of the change we made. So there was a number of contract background investigators, no FTEs, but some contract background investigators. They were moved to HR as part of the hiring process changes that we made. Matt,
Okay,
anything to add to that?
but then the increase from baseline, if you went back, I mean, now 762.
The change was actually from 2022 to 2023.
Yes.
And then you'll notice after 2023, it's been kind of a standard.
I missed that whole category of 2022. Thank you.
Further questions? Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next one, public defender. And so you can kind of see this here. So they're looking to be a little over the original budget by about 42,000. This is looking to for appropriate existing fundings for the Aurora Sustained Program. And I'll let Elizabeth talk to you about that. You see the staffing levels are constant through this, and the budget is generally no amendments and reflecting, again, those citywide increases. So with that, I will turn it over to Elizabeth and the commission.
Good evening, Council and Mayor Kaufman. Thank you, Jason. As he said, we do have a slight increase in the original budget. That's just appropriating existing funds that we had gotten from grant funding from the Colorado Competency Fines Committee. Those are also budgeted. Those funds are also budgeted for 2025. Our renewal application for that is pending. And then there are no amendments in the 2025 proposed budget. Our base budget increases based on, as it says, mandated increases for our contracted attorneys. And those are the conflict attorneys that we have to outsource for, similar to as Jack was describing in cases where there's a conflict of interest. And then increase in transcript costs and software. And I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Questions? Councilmember Bergen.
Yes, obviously we're talking about the proposal on the domestic violence that we've commissioned. So this doesn't reflect out to 2025 any of those changes that could happen.
They could. I would tell you right now, given the time. Sorry, Elizabeth, I'll let you weigh in. But on all of our courts, I would tell you that none of these reflect changes. These are status quo budgets. Given the timing we're talking about at the resolution council passed, which would be a mid 2025, so July 1, we cease doing intake. As we've talked to council about, there are still significant caseloads in the court system that will take a while to work through at least 2025. I'll let the other appointees discuss it, but I don't think you would see staffing reductions or workloads adjust until 2026 at the earliest, but that's certainly not in 2025.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none, thanks, Elizabeth. Appreciate all you do.
Thank you.
Council, sorry, you have to keep dealing with me for a little bit. I'll try and get through these quickly. So the first one up is the most important, which is City Council. So you can kind of see the budget here, no change in staffing, remarkably level in terms of the funding, and just, again, those minor increases due to personal services, dues and subscriptions, and other minor amendments. There are no amendments in the 2025 budget. I don't have it here, but just as a reminder, there is a page in the document that calls out all of the different dues, subscriptions, sort of line items that you all take throughout the year. There's a lot of standing things that you all make sure we want to do, whether it's get a table at this event, or do it belong to CML, things like that. All of that's budgeted. All of that details in the budget. And Greg, what page is that?
Page I-38.
So that is in page I-38 if you want to look at that detail and let us know if you have any questions. But are there any questions on the City Council budget and associated costs?
Questions?
Okay. Seeing none, we'll move now into the public safety group. We'll start with the fire department. So the budgets, as Greg talked about a little bit earlier, this year it does add one FTE battalion chief, and then it does add a career service public information officer. That's going to allow us actually to redeploy a uniform position that's associated with that. And then the intent there is actually to upgrade that position to a battalion chief. And then same thing with our career service community engagement coordinator. We are adding a career service to, again, professionalize that. The purpose behind those battalion chief position and then that upgrade is we want to fully stand up our EMS branch. That is a really important that it's the most valuable, most frequent service that the fire department provides. All the service they provide is valuable, but we want to finish standing up that branch, making sure we've got that. It does have some one-time funding in the budget for out at the training center to replace the ventilation system in the fire bays. And then it does have include the addition of a GIS data analyst. We're going to actually add that over in IT. That position is going to be dedicated to public safety. We have a number of needs in our public safety, whether it's fire, whether it's police, whether it's 911. We want to go ahead and put that within our IT group where we've got an IT GIS manager. They do great work. We want to give them some resources and dedicate those resources to our public safety agencies. So that position's in there. That request started with fire, and as I started asking around, we had some additional needs, and so we think by placing it in a centralized place within IT, that's going to allow us to maximize that, give it the best leverage. So those are the additions we have for fire. Next slide. Police amendments, we have 7 additional positions. You'll see that we've got 4 FTE in our quality assurance unit. This is really our data unit, really making sure that we are being data driven in terms of our approach to these policing and really making sure we're doing that. These folks are right now, we've stood up a process where we are doing regular looks backs across 2 months of data by each district command, as well as our special operations, and really trying to make sure that we're data driven. And so we need to get those folks some FTE in there to help with that lift and making sure that we've got that and we're being data driven. Similarly, we continue to see lots of records requests come in. So we actually think these 2 FTE records technicians are $0 ads. If you look in the budget, they're offset by the fees that we charge for folks putting in those records requests. And then finally, we did again have a data analyst, again, specifically on that data side, making sure we are being data driven and really looking at that. We are also adding a 2-year pilot for professional security services to make sure that we are, again, looking where we can leverage outside assistance. We're doing that some. So right now we're using outside security when we have somebody in the hospital, rather than having a uniformed police officer have to sit on that person 24/7. We're using outside security services to, again, allow that police officer to be redeployed back out, protecting the community. So it's that type of thing. We're continuing funding for our impound lot. So we're continuing funding for that program so that folks that are victim of motor vehicle theft don't have to pay those towing and impound fees. And then finally, this budget does include the elimination of the photo enforcement. We know council told us to look at that. We're continuing to look at that, but until we're ready to come to you all with what that looks like. We want to go ahead and remove that out of the budget. And then when we're ready, we'll be back to council to talk about if you all wanted to proceed with that. So those are the police ads, and I see Councilmember Bergen with her hand up.
Yes, thank you. Since you added a PIO in fire, do we have one for police already?
Yes, ma'am. This is actually something that police had done. They'd over the last few budgets, one of the things we had done is civilianize our police PIOs. So we have actually a number of career service civilian police PIOs. We actually have one PIO left in both police. And then with this move in fire, we're still going to have a uniformed PIO there. We think it's important to have a uniform PIO in both services. Quite frankly, when an incident occurs, we have great professional staff, but often the press wants to see somebody in uniform. So both in police and fire, we still have one person that is dedicated in uniform to each of those functions.
Okay, there's a uniform one for police.
Yes, ma'am, and a uniform one for fire as well.
Okay, thank you.
And then next slide. In the Aurora 911, this is our amendment. As Greg said, one of the things we did do is move all those staff from the general fund to the E911 fund. The reason we were able to do that is council had authorized the increase to that 911 surcharge. Thank you very much. Tina and Scott promised to spend those funds very, very wisely. So in addition to moving these expenses over, giving some relief to the general fund, there is also the added ability to continue to meet our technology needs and potential future staffing needs in this fund. So we're really grateful for that. We're looking at how to best utilize those funds. And so we'll be back with some additional detail as we continue to program them. This is the first move of a number of moves that are coming. So that's the 911. That's it for public safety. I have Chief Jewell, I have Chief Otten, and I have Tina all online. They are the smart people if you have questions about any of the operations or the impacts of this budget.
Question? I have a question, Mayor.
Looks like Francoise was first, Mayor.
Okay.
Mayor, you're muted. Mayor, you're muted.
Councilmember Bergen, then Councilmember Hancock. You're muted.
You're muted, Francois.
Dang it. Okay. Did we add FTEs on 911 recently?
I think there's certainly some movement over from the general fund into the 911 fund. Tina, was there a net add there? Or when was the last time we did a net add in 911? I don't see Tina.
Well, and they can answer it later. I just do hear from constituents that feel, that we could probably use more people in 911 dispatch. So I don't know, hopefully we are fully staffed for all shifts.
We'll
We are
put
fully
that
staffed.
response in our response packet.
Yeah, let me just say, because I go to 911 every now and then and go out patrol every now and then. And I think that I think 911 is really responsive. I think the issue is we're understaffed in patrol. And so if it's not a priority one call, there's a real delay in PD being able to respond to, a priority 2 call or below. But I think we're almost fully staffed in 911. I think we're close.
Yes, sir. We're very close. I think particularly on our callers, I think we might have a couple of support staff or other things like that, but we are very close. And I think actually with this next academy, Tina and I have been talking about overhiring so that she can weather some attrition.
Councilmember Hancock. Councilmember Hancock.
Since Tina's on, I'll just take it offline and ask her about it. I was concerned about the spacing and the accommodations. I've been over to the 911 center. They seem pretty packed in there. So I'm wondering if they'll be able to, they're in that part of the library. So I'll just ask her about that offline.
Yeah, we could, real quick, one of the things we were doing for all of public safety is we're completing a public safety facilities master plan where we've gone around in and done an assessment of all of our existing facilities, as well as sit down with the leadership from each department and really try and get our arms around what is future growth needs, what are future needs. And that's certainly part of the discussion is a future 911 call center. So that call center is probably about 20 years old. And so it's one of the things we are looking at in that public safety facilities master plan.
Further questions on 911? Councilmember Hancock?
No, I was saying thank you.
And I would say on police or fire either. I know I moved those real quick. I was just gonna take questions at the end of this. So if there's any questions for police or fire, they're online as well.
Okay, on police, how are we doing in terms of, I know there was a 2017 study that identified a number of jobs that uniformed police were doing that could be done by civilians and get the uniformed police, doing policing on the street. How are we doing on that?
I've got Chief Jewell on. I'll let him speak to that, but I think it's one of those where we've added, particularly as staffing our uniforms has gotten really tough. It's something that we've really looked at, particularly for the last 2 or 3 budgets. We've added a number of positions, I think in line with that 2017 study that you've noted. So we've done that. And then I think it's something we continue to look at. Chief Jewell and I, we've had really good success with our crash teams, our civilian crash teams that have gone there. And Chief Jewell and I have started some conversations about potentially the next step would be to look at some civilians that could respond to property crime that's not in progress. So Chief Jewell, anything to add there and in terms of that study or other efforts?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Batcher. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Acting Deputy Chief Jewell. So pointing out that that crash team has been worth their weight in gold with regard to alleviating a lot of the crash reports from our uniformed officers, and especially those are reports that take a lot of time to complete. So they've been doing a great job. And then the other thing we're actively looking at and have instituted in some areas is some civilianized investigations that also is helping support some of those efforts as well. So those are the 2 highlights right there. And we continue to look at other areas that we can make improvements on.
Great, thanks. Councilmember Lawson?
So on the public safety master plan, how far in the future are you looking? As we're building, we're hit close to 400,000 in our population and we continue to build. So that means we got to start thinking about the future in terms of police, headquarter, places where we could put the police and the fire, how we're going to do all of the, I guess, resources. I mean, how far in the future are you looking? Because it looks like sometimes we're just kind of looking for right now to maybe a couple years. How far are you looking at? And right now we are growing. So it's going to be some real issues with just, operations, where we house. Are we going to build something else? Are we going to use something else that we have out there in the eastern portion of the city? So how far does your public safety master plan go?
Yeah, Laura, you want to take that one for me?
Yes, sir. Good evening, Laura Perry, Deputy City Manager. So the Public Safety Master Plan is looking at 25 years into the future.
Great question. Thank you, ma'am.
Further questions? Seeing none, thanks.
Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and the next slide here, we'll go to, so the compensation and benefits. This is just, again, as we touched on, our turnover is down. It is better than recent history, but it's still a little high. Like we've talked about in the past, we like to see that number about 9 to 12%. It's falling. We think that number is probably going to be peaked in 2021, 2022, and then 2023, we're able to bring it down. We think that number is going to continue to fall this year, probably being about the 14% range, 14 and change. And so we'd like to see it continue to fall, but we're moving in the right direction. And a lot of that's in part from the investments you've allowed us to make by supporting strong compensation and benefits. We've had success with that. Departments have been working very hard on that. You heard from Candace, you'll hear from other departments. This is really a major focus for us, making sure we can get fully staffed and stay fully staffed. Greg touched on it. This budget does include the 2-year collective bargaining agreements that were signed with both police and fire. And then on the career service side, we are continuing our pay for performance or merit pay. And so what we've got in next year's budget allows for continuation of our pay for performance, and that will be depending on performance, depending on contributions, depending upon your overall compensation. You're going to career service employees are probably going to see pay increases between the 3 to 6% range, depending on, again, their performance and their contributions. And then finally, insurance did go up 7.5%. We are bringing on a second insurance provider that will be United to stand alongside Kaiser. So I'll be getting with you all in the coming weeks to kind of walk you through what exactly that change looks like. But overall, insurance costs are going up about 7.5% on the health insurance side. So any questions on compensation or benefits? All right, seeing none. Next slide. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Laura and let you all stop having to look at my face and hear my voice. So Laura, take it away.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Again, Laura Perry, Deputy City Manager. Tonight, I'll be walking you through several areas. First, pros, then we'll talk about development review and get into our capital plan. So first, PROS, as a reminder, PROS has several sources of funding that are non-general fund. So this year for 2025, there are several budget amendments within these funds, and I will walk through each one respectively. So for our recreation fund, we are continuing to move forward with the direction given by City Council at the spring workshop earlier this year regarding moving towards better cost recovery for our recreation programs within the recreation fund. As a reminder, as part of the spring workshop, several budget changes were presented that were endorsed by City Council, which including shifting some costs to other PROS funds, eliminating 7 FTEs that are custodial positions, and also shifting some materials costs to other sources of funding. And that results in a net reduction of 11 FTE and associated expenditures. Moving to the Open Space Fund. Within the Open Space Fund, we are making an investment in parks and open space security with the addition of 4 additional daytime rangers. These 4 additional rangers are in addition to the 11 rangers that we currently have full-time rangers on staff. And the intent of this addition is to provide additional coverage across our parks and open space system. In addition to rangers, we are adding additional funding for private security services. Currently, we have a security service that patrols parks overnight. We are adding additional funding to enhance that service, as well as investing in physical security improvements within our parks, which includes park signage, as well as procuring 2 additional mobile cameras. So currently PROS has mobile cameras that they circulate across various parks in the system. And with the additional 2, this will provide additional coverage for areas where we're seeing an increase in crime. Moving to the Golf Enterprise Fund, there is a great need across the city, not just for golf, but beyond PROS facilities and general facilities for facilities maintenance and keeping up with the needs to repair and replace key assets within our facilities and ensure that they're running sufficiently. And within the golf fund, we have several golf courses with many facilities. We are seeing a lot of failures with our assets and our facility needs. And so we are seeking to add an additional FTE to support those facilities maintenance needs. And then last is our Parks Development Fund. We are seeking to add an additional planning supervisor that will be solely focused on supporting our development review process and associated initiatives within PROS. Next slide. And that's a good, yes, sir.
I'm sorry, if I could ask a question on the previous slide. On the elimination of some of the FTEs, were they replaced by contract or were they simply the FTEs not needed?
Yes, so several of our custodial positions have remained vacant for extended periods, and recreation has shifted to using private custodial contractors.
And the others? Positions?
Brooke, can you help me out on this one?
There was cooking positions, which will not be replaced. So, so the others are programs that are no longer operational.
Okay,
And this
thanks.
is Brooke Bell. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions on this slide? Okay, thank you.
Okay, shifting to our development review fund. So for the development review area, the proposed budget includes an addition of 9 FTE, and that's 9 in addition to the 1 that you all saw on the previous slide in the Parks Development Fund. And also funding for contract review across a number of departments. And the contract review will augment our staff as well as support our process improvement initiatives that we actually just presented to the Planning, Economic and Development Policy Committee last week, and we'll be sharing that full presentation with all of council. Development review activity remains very strong, and the additional staffing and contract work will really enable staff to work towards and ensure timely and predictable review for projects moving through the city's development review process. Next slide. Councilmember Bergen.
Sorry, I'm
Councilmember Bowman, sorry.
too slow. On the last slide, I'm glad to see that we're making investments in the Development Review Fund. My question is in terms of the recruitment of those positions. I know you go through human resources. Do they advertise in industry-specific venues?
Yes, they work with various industry partners to advertise depending on the type of position. I have to say for the development services position over the last year, we've had a lot of luck filling our vacancies. And in some areas have been fully staffed. And so that's a huge positive for certainly our development review process and our department needs.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
Okay, shifting to capital. So as Greg referenced earlier, there are several budget amendments in the Capital Projects Fund this year. You will hear from Roberto Venegas on our animal shelter project and capital funding allocated towards that in a few slides. On the transportation front, so Jason mentioned cost increases in response to Councilmember Bergen's question earlier. We have seen a lot of cost increases in our assets. Traffic signals, as an example, now cost over $800,000 to construct and install for one signal. And that's up dramatically. And so across several key areas for transportation, we have increases in funding. So certainly for traffic signal construction, as I mentioned, the cost to construct signals have increased. Traffic signal maintenance, traffic calming. We have an increase in funding in the 5-year plan for projects that include roundabouts, pedestrian crossings, curb ramps, and that will allow the ability for traffic engineering to catch up on about $525,000 in shortfall that they have for our traffic calming program. For local matches, so we've had great success in the grants that we've applied for to date. And so the budget will reflect that success through the programming of local matches for our Dr. Cog Transportation Improvement Program projects that were awarded to the city. For the Majestic Commerce Center, so there is $5.2 million included in the budget to support the early construction of East 38th Avenue from Himalaya Road to Odessa. And this is per the terms of the vesting agreement that we have with the Majestic Commerce Center, which allows for them to have early construction on the project. The city will cover that expense, and then on the back end, we will be working with the Aerotropolis Regional Transportation Authority to receive reimbursement for those expenses. So this is an in and out expense. On the facility side, I referenced that for golf earlier. We are making an increased investment in facility projects in the city, everything from improvements at fire stations to library improvements at various library branches. And then for our new navigation center, setting aside money for needed replacement and rehabilitation costs for the navigation center, as the city is the owner of the facility and will be responsible for those major costs when the need arises. And then last, the city is making strong progress on our ADA transition plan. And in the 5-year plan, we had $1 million previously programmed for 2026. Because of the progress that we've been making, this budget reflects that 1 million being moved up to 2025 to be able to expend to further our efforts to complete the ADA transition plan update for the city. Shifting to PROS, for PROS capital projects, we have an increased investment in that area as well. The 2025 budget includes additional funds for median projects across the city. So going back to cost, the average cost of 1 mile of a 20-foot wide median is about $1.26 million for 1 mile. In recognition of the cost increase, PROS has really taken a look at how we've been delivering median projects and are seeking to move to more of a holistic approach. So right now in each ward, there's small segments of medians that are constructed. And from a construction efficiency and delivery standpoint, that's not very efficient for the city nor cost effective. And so PROS, as reflected in this budget, is moving towards a more holistic approach at constructing wider corridors of median to provide greater benefit and better project efficiencies for delivery for those projects. For technology, the budget also reflects increased investments in storage, Wi-Fi, and technology replacement needs, as well as funds set aside for cybersecurity insurance. And then I already referenced our local matches a couple of slides ago. And then last point here, as you all are very aware, the capital needs in the city far exceed the money that we have to cover them. And so this capital budget is barely brushing the surface at many of the deferred maintenance and replacement and capital investments that are needed to support our growing city. And with that concludes my slides.
Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. My name is Roberto Venegas. I'm a deputy city manager here with the city of Aurora. I'm going to be going over and highlighting several areas across my departments, including changes in housing and community services, human resources, and some updates regarding the marijuana tax revenue fund, the animal shelter, and the navigation center. Next slide. So first, in Housing and Community Services, we'll be converting a current grant-funded data analyst position to an FTE. The state grant for this position is ending, and the data analyst position is vital in tracking performance measures in the homelessness services areas. In particular, the data analyst will be key in measuring outcomes for the navigation center as it comes online in 2025. So this is a current position that we already have. We simply are converting it now that the grant funding has ended from the state, converting it to an FTE and funding it appropriately. The Department of Local Affairs, at the state, as part of the Navigation Center award for the acquisition of the former Crown Plaza Hotel, provided housing voucher grants. In order to access those housing voucher grants, we were required to provide a small match of about $120,000. So that budget is included in 2025. That budget unlocks housing vouchers from the state So it's a kind of a multiplier for us and allowing us to be able to provide those housing vouchers for individuals who, for example, are in the navigation center moving through the tiers. As they become eligible and move through those tiers and are eligible for housing, we can provide these vouchers to place them in housing once they've met the requirements of the tiered system in the navigation center. So we have to provide a local match in the 2025 budget, not a large amount, but certainly accessing vouchers that are really valuable as we start to address case management and address individuals who are working through in our homeless program. We've discussed several times, and this is Judge Day's effort and the mayor in terms of the Heart Court. There's funding provided in the 2025 budget for that. Certainly can provide more information if you'd like, but budget is included in 2025 for the Heart Court, which will work with quite a few homeless individuals as they are adjudicated. And finally, the Youth Violence Prevention Program realignment. We are eliminating 2 currently vacant FTEs, eliminated those for the budget, and we're moving 1 FTE from the Marijuana Tax Revenue Fund to the general fund. Doing that essentially to shore up because of the volatility of the Marijuana Tax Revenue Fund. We wanted to make sure we had it in a revenue source or fund that was more stable, and we'll get to that in a slide down the line. Also, to reference, the mayor mentioned and Councilmember Lawson during the CABC presentation, the budget also does reflect a reallocation of the NOFO budget, which we will not be doing in 2025, and reallocating that budget in 2025 to other line items, and certainly can provide more information on that as well. Next slide. Human resources. Jason touched on this a bit. This is, I think, a success story, but one that we needed to adjust for this public safety division. As you recall, in 2023, I believe 2023, when we began this effort, significant backlogs in the public safety agencies, APD, 911 in terms of staffing, court detention, and others, Aurora 911, et cetera, and working through the background process, which can be extensive, particularly for certain departments, PD in particular. We have funded this to be able to do that. I think we've proven proof of concept for this division. They've worked through a lot of backlogs. I think we're in most of these divisions at full hiring or at overhiring situations or close. But this reflects basically the right sizing of what the resources are needed to do that. So we've added 2 FTEs to this public safety division and HR to be able to do the support for the background checks for primarily public safety departments, but for city departments across the organization. 2025, as was mentioned before, also reflects a budget increase for medical benefits. Those costs have risen. We're not unique. That's across the board for organizations. But one wrinkle is we've added an additional provider alongside our current provider of Kaiser to provide some employee choice. We'd heard a lot of discussion around employees wanting choice on that, and that is reflected in the budget, and in addition to some increased costs to cover those new medical benefits from both providers. Next slide. Marijuana Tax Revenue Fund, my favorite subject. Marijuana and the volatility of the industry, as everybody knows, it's, market pressures and a lot of other factors have created some real change for the industry and has certainly impacted the revenue that's coming in. It is falling still, but not as precipitatively as it was before. The 2025 budget and outgoing budget, we think balances, I think at about a 10% decrease year over year. So while it is still falling, we think it's kind of level set and stable. So we think we are okay both to meet our capital project needs, which is primarily the recreation center debt service for our new recreation centers that are taken out of the marijuana revenue fund. We are good to meet those commitments, and obviously also good to meet our commitments of 1% and 2% for the youth violence and homelessness program services respectively. So, but not a lot of money to do anything beyond that. We really are tight in that revenue fund. The movement of that FTE from the marijuana fund over to the general fund, and basically projecting these 10% increases, we still think we are good in 2025, certainly in outgoing years, to handle our commitments and the capital project commitments, as well as youth violence and homelessness. Next slide. Animal shelter, this will look familiar as well. Laura spoke to this. Her and her team have done an amazing job at trying to put together a capital stack that reduces to as much as possible the debt that we would have to issue for this project. So similar to when you buy a home, the more money you can put down, the less your debt payment, the less your mortgage moving forward, right? So, and put together several funding sources from capital funds, including $14 million in general government capital impact fees, $5 million in capital project funds that are available, and $2.9 million of ARPA funds, which were originally allocated to renovate the existing facility. As you may recall, once we brought a design group to do that, they said to renovate a 40-year-old facility, you'd probably be looking in the $10 to $20 million range. And it really was not cost effective to do that rather than just to build a new facility. You would be essentially, given the age of the current facility and the accreditation standards for animal shelters, we would be in a bad place spending money that was not used wisely. So we pivoted, and that's why we have the capital stack here. We will have to look at operating needs ongoing, and those are conversations that we continue to have with other potential partners, other jurisdictions. We're really early in the phases of design and what the facility will look like and how we might be able to have partnerships with other folks. We will continue those conversations. But for now, we think we are looking at about a $40 million capital stack to build a new animal shelter. Next slide. Navigation Center. We are, as you know, acquired the facility at the former Crown Plaza Hotel off of I-70 at the end of May for approximately $26.5 million with state, federal, other county ARPA funds combination and our own ARPA funds. We are in negotiations and have a proposed lease and operator agreement with an operator to be brought forward for council at the Monday formal council meeting. We have shared the draft of those proposed operating navigation agreements with council, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago. And certainly if any questions we have on those, I'm happy to answer those. But that will be on the agenda for formal approval on Monday night. The Navigation Center, I will highlight under one of these bullets, one of the items that Laura Perry mentioned. It is our facility, and as such, a facility of this size and complexity, like anything, like your own home, roof repairs, major HVAC repairs, things happen over the course of the year. We don't want to be caught flat-footed when that does occur, and we certainly can't expect an operator to shoulder those kinds of improvements. They will handle general maintenance and things that are kind of normal routine, but a roof replacement, an HVAC replacement, we are setting aside this $1.5 million reserve funds annually that would kind of roll over if we don't use it, so that if we do have a major repair in year 4 or year 5, we can use those funds to address those needs. That's not to say that we've done a good assessment and kind of a home inspection, for lack of a better phrase, and we don't have anything that's end of life or imminent, right? So we're not anticipating any particular system going down in the next 6 months or year, but we want to be prepared that eventually that will happen. It is a very large facility, and so certainly we don't think that, but it's not a brand new facility, so we certainly anticipate some renovation needs in the future, and we've set aside some funds to do that. Additionally, we are, as you have discussed, the operator, and it's very clear in our operator agreement that there's an expectation that they will be raising funds privately to offset costs, right? So we're hoping to see those costs flatten or decrease as that private philanthropic participation and other things ramp up, and we consolidate a lot of the former activities in the homeless service area, like safe outdoor spaces, other things that we were using because we did not have a facility, a day resource center that actually isn't very functional and very difficult to maintain. We hope by consolidating, we'll see some economies of scale and some better use of our funds, and also by providing the expectation that our service provider in there will be able to raise funds, that we'll see some efficiencies in that area. Councilmember Bergen, sorry.
Thank you, Roberto. Just in terms of our participation in the operating cost, so allocating the $2 million that we have always done for homeless services, the state and the counties that did contribute to the capital, are they contributing any monies towards operating cost?
As of now, no. Their money was contributed towards the acquisition and renovation, right? So, go ahead.
Oh,
Go
I was
ahead.
going to say, I don't know if we've asked them to contribute on the operating, but my feeling is since this is part of the agreement is it's a Denver metro area navigation center that we have to take people from, different areas that it might be, good for them to contribute some monies towards operations because they will benefit from it.
And that is our working assumption is that as we renovate the facility, those conversations will be ongoing for ongoing operational costs. Our first hurdle was getting an operator in board, right? Once we get the operator board, we'll be able to get a better sense of what those operating costs and other revenue sources, other entities, jurisdictions, foundations, who would be part of that discussion.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Excuse me, Roberta. I wonder if you could address, the fact is that the operator is expected to raise some money privately.
Absolutely. They are expected and it's part and, formalized in the agreement, and they are understanding that is the assumption and their responsibility that they are bringing dollars to the table to be able to help with the operations and also, offset the cost that the city is providing. So that is the expectation.
Just to add real quick, Denver should be contributing some monies because they did not contribute to the capital, but they will possibly be sending people to our navigation center. So I think we definitely should engage a conversation with them and see if they're, able to contribute.
We certainly can do that, but I will note that there are navigation centers in all these jurisdictions, right? So they will have their own navigation center as well. So there will be reciprocity. We could essentially be sending some folks from Aurora to theirs as well. So that conversation is a two-way street, but we certainly can have it, and they have actually, I think, broached that or discussed that, I think, with the mayor. So we could certainly follow up on what that might look like in the coming months.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Lawson.
Thank you. Roberto, thank you for the presentation. I just have a question. So you stated that the operator they are responsible to do some fundraising. Okay, so that's their expectation. That's what's in the agreement. I guess my question is, and I'm always looking at another side of things. What if they don't make the fundraising goal? Is that we would have to supplement them, or has that even been discussed, or will we take some of this 1.5 million and have to supplement if they can't meet the fundraising goal?
Lots of ways that we can address that. The first one would be we have a tiered system that's formalized in the operator agreement. We have an expectation that we will provide these services in each tier. They will work towards meeting a scope of work as part of their operator that meets that need, right? They're not going to be able to do that on day one. That'll take some time, and we've had those discussions with them because the facility will need to be renovated and it's not going to be ready to go from one day to the next. But in the scenario that you're describing, in which they're not meeting it, we're not quite there. There are provisions within the agreement that basically allow us to renegotiate the scope, right? So that's always going to be, because we can't commit multi-year for the council on any budget, right? So we're going to say, this is what we're going to do in 2025. But in subsequent years, if you come back and say, hey, we couldn't raise any more than this, then we can negotiate an adjusted scope of work of services that they can meet and that we can meet. Now, having said that, if we think, well, that really wasn't what we had signed up for, and we really think you should, and we don't like the reduced scope of work, then we can obviously go to another operator. That these are annual agreements. They move forward, you approve these agreements, and you feel like the operator may not be providing what you want by way of scope, then we certainly can pivot to a different operator. Now, having said that, I think there's a lot of provisions in the agreement that allow for renegotiation, that allow us to basically say, okay, it's a down year. You're only able to raise 3 million instead of the 5 million we're anticipating. Let's look at other adjustments. But at a certain point, it's a discussion with the council to say, these are the services we want to provide. And if this operator can't hit that, then we've got to move on to another operator or move on to another plan B, whatever that might be. But we've anticipated that. That's an excellent question. That is one of those where we do not want to be holding the bag entirely in year 2 and 3. We have other kind of safety measures in the perform and the operator agreement that allow us to adjust if we're not getting the scope that we're looking for.
Yeah, and I'm glad that they're, oh, I'm sorry, Mayor, can I just make
No,
this
go
one
ahead,
quick?
please. Go ahead,
I'm
please.
glad that that's gonna be stipulated, and because, I don't want them to get in there and say, oh, well, we didn't quite make it, but the city's just going to supplement. So I'm glad that that's gonna be emphasized, that, the fundraising is very important. Don't slack. Do it. So thank you for that explanation. And I'm glad it's in the agreement that we can look at things and renegotiate if we see some things that are deemed not what they're supposed to be doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and let me just say that obviously I was involved in the design of the program and in conversations with the Daniels Fund and the Anschutz Family Foundation as we were designing the program to make sure it was something that they were interested in funding.
Yeah, Mayor, I think your leadership and some of your colleagues have certainly created a concept here that has a lot of interest from a lot of different private foundations for certain and others. So I think we should be able to hopefully meet those matching or those fund requirements or third-party funding sources. So anything else on this? Otherwise, I will turn this back over to Greg and Jason. Okay. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Actually, Marshall Brown is up.
Yeah, I'm Mayor and Council. Good to see you again. I'm going to touch base just briefly on some of the utility amendments, including some of the capital highlights. You've seen this before. I know Janet Marlowe just presented the Citizen Water Advisory Commission recommendations, and some of this is a little bit redundant. So our budget for the combined 3 utilities last year was about $200 million. The adopted budget was actually 211.6. We're proposing a 6.3% increase. That's driven primarily by our cost increases that we're having to absorb in the utility. The utility is a little bit different than the other city operations in that personnel costs are only about 1/3 of the cost drivers in the utility. Most of our costs are associated with things, operating costs like electricity, chemicals, things like that. We've seen significant increases in those areas, and that's really the driver of the 6.3% increase in our operating budgets. There are some new personnel positions we're requesting, 9 positions to be exact. Some of these are costs that we've had ongoing for a little while, and we're proposing to take some contracted costs and shift those into permanent positions. Those types of positions include the Development Review Fund positions that we're seeing the ongoing increased workload there. The land specialist, resource specialist, is associated with our recent Rocky Ford or Arkansas Basin acquisition, where we're leasing the water and the land back to a farmer. In that lease price, we're collecting revenue for this land specialist. So some of these increased costs are also being offset by other increased revenues. So with that, briefly, our capital costs, I think, are on the next slide. Aurora water capital, and this was referenced a little bit by Greg earlier, a lot of capital projects associated with the water, wastewater, and stormwater funds, primarily in water. And then the second largest is wastewater. But in water, we have about $1.5 billion worth of projects programmed over the next 5 years. The largest single driver or project is our Wild Horse project, which is programmed in here at about $600 million. There are a couple $100 million additional that we think will hit us when we roll the next 5th year onto the back end of capital next time we come. But most of these costs are associated with growth and system expansion. And so the growth in system expansion costs are recovered through our fees, our connection fees. Operating costs we recover through our rates. So again, significant projects here. We also have some aging infrastructure. When we have to go rehabilitate the aging infrastructure, that's considered an operating cost and hits our rate payers. So the Rampart delivery system, for example, is about 65 years old. Those pipes that bring most of our water into the city from the mountains, and those pipes again need to be rehabilitated and or replaced. So that's about $100 million project. Lots of capital projects. Also acquisition of new supplies. We do have close to $150 million in our source of supply area. 100 million of that is specifically just water rights acquisitions. So a lot of costs. And again, most of the system expansion, water rights acquisition, all those costs are absorbed in our connection fees that do not affect our ratepayers. So that's our water capital. Next slide. Talks about our wastewater fund. Again, $240 million of projects programmed here over the next 5 years. This includes both stormwater and wastewater. Close to $100 million of collection system expansion, new sewer line construction, some replacement, again, primarily associated with growth and affecting connection fees. You see at the bottom some of our stormwater projects. A lot of those are also associated with growth and expansion, some rehabilitation there, but primarily growth driven affecting connection fees. So next slide.
Actually, I think that might be your last slide.
Okay, so as a reminder, and again, Janet touched on this earlier, but we're proposing roughly a 5% increase to our rate revenue base, distributed a little bit differently across the different rate classes. And then connection fees for water, we're proposing a 10% increase, and on wastewater, a 20% increase. So most of these increased capital costs are affecting our connection fees. So with that, I guess, any questions?
Any questions? Well, seeing none, thanks, Marshall. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. I'm the last remaining person that's between all of us getting to go home. I just would need to say, Councilmember Sundberg, tonight while I was watching, I actually took a picture of you reading my budget book on the screen. That's actually going to be my, I'm gonna print that out. That's gonna be my my bookmark for the 2025 budget. Yes.
I was referencing, sir.
So budget calendar, I'm just pointing out really fast. We're ticking through all the pieces that we need to. Our next piece is October 5th. We're going to have the fun fall budget workshop, and then we're planning on coming to you for formal approval on October 28th and November 4th. And with that, do you have any general questions that weren't covered anywhere else?
Any questions?
As a reminder, we heard a bunch of questions tonight. We will, Greg and his team were all capturing notes. We will get you written responses to those. And as you have time to digest this, if you have additional questions, send them to me, send them to Greg, and we will get you all written answers in preparation for our Saturday workshop.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you
Good
much.
night.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.